Reborn as the Viking Pirate King. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 176 Bloody Night, 1. General, as you can see, there are hardly any Vikings in my village, because those Viking bastards know I'm a less than honorable lord. My heart has always longed for the prosperous and wealthy England across the North Sea. Of course, not to lead pirates on plunder. Look at my upright face, am I that kind of person? I yearn for your holy church of the Lord. After confessing his sins before the cross, the naval captain, Radus, returned to the banquet hall in Coldwater Keep. The vast hall was now filled with the aroma of delicious food. Loki had already prepared table after table of exquisite delicacies, treating the victorious warriors to a near celebration. All the captains and soldiers who entered the hall gnashed at the vibrantly colored roasted whole lambs, their mouths watering. They all gave Loki a thumbs up. Only Marindin, cleansed but still shackled, in the corner, glared at him with cold eyes. Loki, oblivious, continued to enthusiastically explain his way of survival to Lidus and the 3 dragon riders beside him. Even in my youth, I felt a call of the Holy Lord Christ. He told me he awaited me beyond the North Sea. From that day on, I resolved to cross the North Sea. Of course, I must reiterate, not for plunder, but in pursuit of the holy light. As he spoke, he walked to each long table, personally cutting a slice of mutton and shoving it into his mouth. This gesture signaled to Duke Bernard and the other English soldiers that the food was free of toxins and could be eaten without fear. He, the Holy Lord, truly did not deceive me. At the Linty Abbey, the Venerable Father Francis and I became close friends. He taught me how to preach, even giving me his own gold coins accumulated by the Linty Abbey over decades, so that I could spread the Holy Lord's gospel in this untamed land. Before this grand banquet begins, I propose that we raise our first glass to our Venerable Father Francis. Without him, Hanshu village wouldn't be what it is today. Let's toast to the great Father Francis. Cheers. Francis watched the demon's exaggerated performance with a mixture of helplessness and indignation. He nearly gnashed his back teeth to pieces with his boundless hatred, but he was helpless against this clown. It seemed all he could do now was raise his glass and swallow the bitterness along with the beer. Years ago, I only passively carried out the Lord's will, unsure why. But today, I suddenly understood. It turns out the Lord Jesus Christ has enlightened me, a foolish and dull person, just to welcome you all today. My village will wholeheartedly serve you all. All my villagers will lead the horses and whip you, providing all the logistical support your troops need. Duke Bernard had originally watched his exaggerated performance with a cold eye, but when the interpreter beside him explained the meaning of Loki's words to him, even Bernard, who had always been calm, couldn't help but blush slightly. How could there be such a shameless person in the world? But it doesn't matter. As long as this kid can appease these English sailors, he will have completed his mission. When night falls, I can expose him myself and incidentally find another ally, but of course, these are all law-abiding farmers. I still have a small request. I hope that you gentlemen will not force us honest peasants to take up swords and go out to fight. That is not our specialty. Believe me. Leave us behind to treat your injuries, cook, and transport your food. We will be able to exert more energy. After a moment, let us raise his glass and saluted respectfully. Understood, Lord Loki, you can rest assured. We are not like those uncivilized Slavs. Although we are a coalition force, on the land where my English soldiers are stationed, I guarantee that all good citizens with good intentions will be treated fairly. The Navy captain said this with righteous indignation, and the soldiers in the audience applauded. At this point, a huge stone in Loki's heart fell to the ground. After a lot of hard work, the lives of the residents of Hanshu village were finally saved for the time being. What he feared most was that these soldiers would recruit men in the village to serve as cannon fodder after they had enough food, and use the women as tools for sexual gratification. It was not a good feeling to have your destiny completely out of your own hands. The dinner began, and the English soldiers in the banquet hall began to feast on their food and drink beer. Having just slaughtered a large group of saber-toothed mercenaries during the day, Every soldier's face was filled with excited smiles. Especially after being stimulated by alcohol, everyone was desperately bragging about how useful they were in the battle. Some even jumped onto the long table and performed a cheerful Saxon dance. Seeing that the play was almost over for the time being, Loki rubbed his cheeks, which were sore from smiling for a long time, and came to the attic on the top floor of Hanshu village. The place was deserted, with only the cool evening breeze caressing my cheeks. Early autumn had passed, and deep autumn was approaching. In another month, snow would fall once again across Scandinavia. The sky was dark, starless and moonless. Suddenly, a vast, dark cloud had drifted in from the direction of Mount Shyandran. Thunder rumbled from the horizon, signaling the impending downpour. Loki looked worriedly at the 3 dragons perched outside the village, his face once again filled with deep worry. Merindon had been captured, his village completely occupied by the English. 3 dragons lay threateningly at the village gates, and he had to protect the women and children from a swarm of wolves and tigers. Even more daunting, there was a Duke Bernard in the village. His troops were lying in ambush in the woods outside the village. Even now, Loki still had no idea whether he was coming to ally with the English or to massacre them as a token of his allegiance to the Slavs. This man was truly cunning. But his instincts told him that Duke Bernard was no match for the easily dismissed. In the square below, groups of drunken English soldiers, arm in arm, walked back to their quarters to prepare for bed, shouting and whistling at the women they passed. Loki couldn't help but frown. In the short term, under the control of the holy bishop, these soldiers could still control themselves. But in the long term, expecting these jackals who entered the village as invaders to maintain their moral integrity was a joke. He gazed anxiously toward the east, muttering to himself, according to the time, they should be here too. Chapter 177 Bloody Night, 2. At the same time, 4 kilometers from Hanshu village, a flat, jet-black speedboat glided across the lightless waters. To maintain its concealment, the vessel had no lighting. In the pitch darkness, a steady baritone slowly spoke, "Sir, we've arrived. This is the village of the Viking nobleman Loki Starlag." The voice was elderly, and one could tell the speaker was quite old. As he began to speak, everyone around him immediately fell silent, giving the old man room to speak. According to little Luozi, the imperial seal he found fell into the hands of this Viking lord? Yes, the steady baritone replied crisply, without a trace of hesitation. Well, I still understand the little Luozi's methods. As far as his real vision, knowledge and brains are concerned, there is nothing wrong with him being a treasure appraiser in Paris. But this man, at the age of more than 30, insisted on marrying a foreign woman, and for this reason he even rejected the niece of Prince Li Yu. Haha. It's really unreasonable. Although today's Tang dynasty no longer has the scene of the Kailan prosperity 200 years ago, the Tang Li family is still not something that ordinary people can disobey. It is impossible for Luojuan not to understand such a simple truth. Haha, what the ancestor Hongjin said is right. We cultivators of this generation must cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires, because all these human feelings are the roots of trouble. The love and desire for women made Lord Xuanzong alienated from government affairs, and eventually laid the seeds for the Anchi rebellion. The filial piety to his parents made the master of military strategy Guo Ziyi not come out to lead troops until he was 58 years old. By the time he quelled the Anchi rebellion, he was already 66 years old. What use is a 66-year-old man to the imperial court? If he had abandoned outdated practices and led his troops to save the world sooner, our great Tang dynasty would definitely not be what it is today. Whenever the Enlushan rebellion, the period that marked the Tang dynasty's decline from prosperity, is mentioned, every Tang person who lived through that chaotic era is filled with grief. They witnessed a wealthy and powerful nation, unprecedented on earth, collapse in just 8 years, becoming the outwardly strong but inwardly weak state it is today. King Shenren, now 98 years old, is no exception. 39 years ago, when the Enlushan rebellion broke out, he, as a junior fellow of King Shenren, the head of the Izumo Trading Company, was serving as a postmaster at a transit post station in the Great Khan's protectorate of Takhiristan, a crucial junction on the Silk Road. This position was insignificant within the Tang dynasty, but at the borders guarded by the Jitashi, it assumed immense importance. Merchants traveling along the Silk Road from both east and west had to stop at his post station to change horses, restock water and provisions, and obtain certificates of ordination. Meanwhile, protected by his own army, The once peaceful days were ruthlessly shattered on a bloody night. On December 16, 755 AD, the Unlushan rebellion broke out. Unlushan, the military governor of Fanang, Pinglu, and Hedan, mobilized his Tang troops, along with the Tongluo, Zai, Khitan, and Shuai, totaling 150,000 men, claiming to be 200,000. He launched an uprising in Fanang, under the pretext of concerning the nation's danger and carrying out a secret imperial decree to suppress Yangua's Hong. After decades of covert planning, this former Sogdian noble from the western regions finally challenged the Tang dynasty's Li family's rule. Unlushan's rebellion was premeditated. Simultaneously with a rebellion in the three northeastern towns, the western region states immediately responded to the call and launched rebellions, echoing their heroes from the north who had infiltrated the Tang. Almost overnight, the western regions were plunged into chaos. King Shanren, unaware of the rebellion, was shocked to discover that the once close-knit Indo-European brothers had all risen in rebellion. The western merchants, who once bowed and scraped before them, eager to kneel at their feet and kiss the tips of their shoes, now roared with fury, turning into frenzied bandits, their butcher knives raised. They slaughtered every Tang merchant they encountered, insulting their families and plundering their wealth. Suddenly, everyone seemed transformed into a demon. King Shanren, then 59 years old, was an ordinary swordsman who had just reached the foundation-building stage. He led his fellow merchants in a desperate battle, embarking on the long journey home from Takhilistan, thousands of miles away. Along the way, the once humble and courteous Laulan, Kutcha, and Cheshi peoples all reverted to their former ferocious demeanor. Looking back now, King Shanren had no idea how he had managed that long journey home. He only knew that by the time he reached Lanzhou Prefecture on the Longyao Road, he was the only one left in his group. His 3 wives, 7 children, nearly 100-man guard, and a vast fortune had all been lost on this journey home. Seeing his fellow apprentice in such a miserable state, the head clerk of the Chuan Trading Company, Master Kingayan, sent him back to the Shushan sword sect where they had trained. However, this journey of flight had completely changed King. He no longer believed in this country, nor did he believe that simply relying on business and exploiting the barbarians could restore the Tang Empire to greatness. During his bloody escape, he felt that nothing was trustworthy except his flying sword. The Tang people treated the barbarians with brutal suppression, ruling them with fear, not justice. They would learn the true nature of the sky above them. King spent 20 years in seclusion in Shushan. During this time, he severed all emotions, lived among monkeys in a cave in the mountains behind Shushan, and devoted himself to the art of killing. 20 years later, when he emerged from the mountains, he had advanced from the foundation establishment stage to the golden core stage and reached the nascent soul stage, a mere step away from the golden immortal realm achieved by the Shushan sect master, Ling Zuzi. On the day King emerged from retreat, dark clouds obscured the sky, and a torrential downpour fell. As King, clad in a tattered straw raincoat, soared on his flying sword into the Shushan sword tomb, the sect leader's training ground, Ling Zuzi felt as if he were witnessing a walking corpse, its 3 souls and 7 spirits reduced to ash. Unsure what to say to his disciple, whose heart was filled with despair, he could only wave his hand helplessly. The next day, true man King Gayan took him down the mountain. Upon his descent, King's heart was devoid of any ordinary compassion. By then, the Anshu rebellion had been quelled. Though the Tang Empire, devastated by the devastation, was littered with corpses, its remaining strength still maintained its title as the world's greatest power. The newly surrendered tribes were once again entering the eastern land of the Tang, learning its advanced technology and culture and seeking opportunities for trade. Everyone around him seemed to have forgotten the bloody incident. Only true man King remained. 20 years of seclusion had forever frozen his life in that bloody escape. His combat prowess had soared since his emergence. He had cultivated a 5-color nascent soul, and the abundant spiritual energy surging within him enabled him to kill with a single glance. If a foreign tribe disobeyed him, he would sever their legs, wrists, or eyes with his sword, or even stroll into their homes and slaughter their entire families. From 90-year-olds to toddlers, King wielded his flying sword, cutting through them like weeds. After slaughtering them all, he would even hang their bodies from kites and fly them high into the sky, so that all the foreign tribes would live in constant fear. At this point, true man King Gayan realized that his junior fellow was completely broken. His problems lay not in his body, but in his heart. He was already a half-step demon cultivator, Keeping him in the country would only bring countless troubles to the order that the Lee family had finally re-established. In desperation, he could only bring him to the far-flung western continent to serve as a thug for the Izumo Trading Company, helping it deal with some tough problems. Today, the hard bone he needed to deal with was Loki Sterrig. Chapter 178 Bloody Night, 3. The first time shopkeeper Luochuan saw this jade disc was during a gambling game in the Conqueror's Fortress. By observing his words and expressions, he could tell that the lord named Loki was a novice in high society. He didn't understand the rules of the gambling game and just played casually, and he was forced to throw out the jade seal, because his wife had already put their fiefdom on the line. When he threw the jade seal out of desperation, shopkeeper Luochuan immediately realized that regardless of whether it was real or fake, it was a treasure worth carefully examining. It might even be an ancient relic left behind by ancient gods or old gods in the mortal world. To this end, he arranged for Loki to win the bet, but then, strange things happened one after another. According to the unwritten rules of my Izumo Trading Company, important weapons must be kept in hand by all means. That night, Luochuan dispatched a sword cultivator from our trading company stationed in the Conqueror's Fortress. This was a sword cultivator from the Hangshan Sword School who had cultivated to the middle stage of the Foundation building and the Enlightenment realm. Such skills are enough to deal with most of the so-called chosen ones in the Western continent. Unexpectedly, the sword cultivator set out that night and never returned. The next morning, Loki and his pirates set sail as if nothing had happened, and from their appearance, they gave no sign of having experienced any battle. He said, nodding softly at this description. For 10 cultivators, the Foundation establishment stage is the first hurdle in their cultivation, and also the most difficult hurdle to overcome. Surviving the Foundation establishment stage determines whether a cultivator possesses the essential prerequisite for physical sainthood. Without sufficient aptitude, even decades of cultivation would prevent a mortal from reaching this threshold. However, once Foundation establishment is achieved, it's like opening the door to a new world. While the concentration of spiritual energy in cultivators at the Golden Core and Nascent Soul stages is higher than that at the Foundation establishment stage, a skilled Foundation establishment cultivator can still, leveraging the right timing, location, and people, pose a threat to high-level sword cultivators. Mortals simply cannot harm them. Although the Hangshan sword sect was founded 400 years ago by abandoned disciples of Mount Shu, its swordsmanship is far inferior to the traditional Shushan sword schools. However, a hairy barbarian could effortlessly defeat a Foundation establishment sword cultivator. This man truly possesses something extraordinary, perhaps even possessing a rare and untold fortune. If it were simply because he killed a Hangshan sword cultivator, such a trivial matter wouldn't be worth bothering you. Even stranger and more bizarre things are yet to come, the middle-aged man continued, his voice still steady, though with a faint tremor. Shopkeeper Luochuan immediately realized the jade seal on this man's person might be even more important than he'd imagined, for this individual, at least in terms of combat prowess, far surpassed his compatriots. According to the headmaster's instructions for overseas shopkeepers, any individual posing a significant threat must be treated with special attention. Therefore, he urgently contacted the shopkeepers of our Izumo Trading Company in Canterbury and London, and dispatched 2 cultivators of even greater skill to Scandinavia. One of these individuals is a Taoist swordsman, the other a Maha's talisman master. Both have reached the Golden Core stage. They entered Hanshu village approximately 14 to 20 days ago. Strangely, after entering, they seemed to melt into the village, remaining motionless. True Man King twirled his beard with his jade-like fingers, his gaze gradually sharpening. When a cultivator reaches his level, he begins to clearly understand the concept of power. Giant cultivators were a scarce commodity in the Eastern Tang dynasty. 2 giant cultivators with such combat power could easily storm a vassal prince's protectorate and slaughter thousands of soldiers. Yet, upon entering a village of hairy barbarians, they surprisingly didn't cause a single commotion. The village was still bustling with joy, still holding a banquet. It didn't look like they had experienced a massacre. Is it possible that these 2 people got hold of this precious treasure, embezzled it, and then ran away? Probably not. I didn't tell them that this was the imperial seal. I just said that it was a beloved thing of mine that was stolen by a thief. And according to the description of the Luochuan Cheofen, this seal looks extremely mediocre in appearance and doesn't look valuable at all. This young lord named Loki is probably much more complicated than he appears. After this incident, The Luochuan Chaofeng made a prompt decision and believed that there must be something big wrong with Loki from Hanshu village. Combined with the fact that he had a treasure that was seriously suspected to be the Imperial Seal, we invited all the giant and realm and above monks of the Izumo Trading Company stationed in France, Visigothia, England, and Bavaria. Hearing that the Imperial Seal might appear, they boarded the Flying Fish Clipper and came here at the fastest speed. To be on the safe side, the Luochuan Chaofeng even invited you, the Immortal, to help with the raid. Shopkeeper Luo believes this boy may have stumbled upon the tomb of an ancient swordsman and stumbled upon this treasure. He may well possess other treasures of even greater value, but as a foreigner, he doesn't yet understand their value. Yes, I understand. Master King's eyes remain calm, neither sorrow nor joy. As a powerful swordsman, severing all emotions and possessing only the lust for blood, he regarded the inhabitants of the vassal states as mere ants. He had roamed the western continent for years, conquering no one, from the demigods of strange religions to the cultists of the dark corners, who had ever been able to escape the might of his three swords. Since leaving Mount Chu 20 years ago, killing had become a breeze for him. Gently patting his Taoist robe, Master King rose from the cabin with his head held high. He raised his left hand high. As everyone stared in astonishment, a mere 3 seconds later, a matte black iron sword flew from the sky, piercing the sails atop the speedboat before landing firmly in the hands of Master King. Sir, I must warn you. Based on my observations over the past 2 days, these newly arrived English and Vikings are likely hostile to each other. Hanshu village should currently be dominated by both factions. This morning, I even saw a dragon belonging to the Dragon Riders. What's the difference between yellow-haired savages, white-cat savages, and black-haired savages? They're all savages. As for the dragons they worship as gods, they're merely low-level divine beasts with awakened intelligence. They're all ants before my sword. Stay in the boat. Do not come ashore without my command. Blades are blind. If I'm forced to kill, I'm afraid I'll accidentally injure you. With these words, Master King stepped to the bow of the boat and hurled his black iron sword. The iron sword was quietly suspended in the air. He leaped up, and the man and the sword turned into a black line, instantly disappearing on the sea outside the speedboat. At the same time, a muffled thunder sounded again in the dark clouds in the sky. Large raindrops began to fall from the sky, forming a dense bead curtain between the sky and the earth. This long-awaited heavy rain finally arrived as expected. The climax of the first 4 volumes of the battle between Vikings, dragons, sword cultivators, and female pharaohs. All the prelude plots are to point to this battle. I will try to keep 3 updates in the next few days. Chapter 179 Bloody Night, 4. Hey, little sister, are you lost? Wow, you're such a cutie. Come into Uncle's arms and let me see you. 2 English soldiers, drunken from a banquet, were wandering around Coldwater Keep when they stumbled across Sophie's room. Seeing a delicate little girl sitting by the windowsill, gazing out at the heavy rain, the 2 drunken men, without hesitation, pushed open the door and entered. The 5-year-old girl leaned softly against the windowsill. Ever since she regained her hearing, she had loved the sound of raindrops hitting the glass. Since becoming wealthy, Loki had purchased many of the most popular luxury goods in the Western continent. For example, the stained glass window Sophie had installed was a high-end piece from Byzantium. It featured rabbits, frogs, suns, and other colorful patterns beloved by children, but she preferred to sit by the plain white window, gazing out at the dark curtain of rain. Suddenly, she saw 2 strangers appear in her room. The little girl was inevitably a little frightened, but at that moment, the Nefertiti within her body awakened. Little sister, remember yesterday's lesson, let them get a few steps closer. Release them before you kill them. Even as the 2 soldiers appeared at the doorway, the golden scorpion perched on Sophie's arm had already leaped into the shadows of the ceiling. But sister, we already have so many bandaged men in this room. If a few more come, we won't have enough room under the bed. During her time with Nefertiti, Sophie, exposed to this language environment, quickly mastered ancient Egyptian, speaking it more fluently than even Viking, to the point where she could converse freely with Nefertiti. Haha, my silly sister. For us Egyptian royalty, how could we be so naive about having too many mummies? If we don't have room to store them, we can just have Anubis transform them into sand and seal them in jars. Look at those Odin followers who tried to break into the castle a few days ago. Were they already sealed in jars? Sophie gazed at the 3 snow-white pottery jars standing against the wall, her admiration for the power of her mysterious elder sister growing stronger. She was undoubtedly a very capable person. Controlling her truly powerless body, she had already helped my father defeat at least 2 foreign invasions. The second time, the 2 men, capable of wielding flying swords, were extremely dangerous, yet they were still drawn into an illusion by my sister and easily killed. Their bodies now lay beneath her bed. With a soft sigh, Sophie rose from the windowsill, revealing the horrorous mask she had placed behind her. The 2 English soldiers who had barged into the room didn't necessarily have any ulterior motives, they simply wanted to take advantage of the situation as invaders to explore the Lord's castle. But upon seeing the exquisite mask, forged entirely from gold, they felt their composure slip away. At that moment, the golden scorpion lurking on the ceiling and the mummy standing in the corner moved simultaneously. The 2 drunken English soldiers, barely making a sound, instantly collapsed and died. Compared to the attackers from a few days ago, these 2 were far too weak. Such a frail shell would be a waste of material even if it were made into a mummy. Well, 1 for each of you, I'll feed you 2 as food, sister. If they're dead, will others notice something's wrong? Sophie asked worriedly. Children of the poor grow up early. Having long followed Loki and watched him oversee the affairs of the village, Sophie understood the basics of village operations. Haha, even if someone's found dead, who would suspect you? What if they hurt Dad? Then Sophie must quickly learn how to control the mummy and use her abilities to protect her family. Nefertiti told Sophie no lies. Sophie's original form remained weak, unable to draw sufficient spiritual energy from the air. This puny body now only possessed 20% of her pre-birth power. This strength could only bully mortals, not truly enough to confront a true god. The golden scorpions and mummies, awakened by divine power, ate differently from living humans. They bit through the skin, rapidly draining the 2 bodies like ripe fruit. The clamor in the banquet hall downstairs gradually faded. Just as Sophie was about to dispose of the remaining skins of the 2 English soldiers, Nefertiti suddenly regained control of her body. She nimbly leaped into the shadows beside the bed, took the mask of Horus, and placed it on her face. The golden mask fitted her face perfectly, and dark golden patterns began to emerge from her skin. One of the mask's 2 enormous eyes of Horus grew darker, while the other resembled a miniature, blazing sun. This mask is the source of power for the sun priests and essential equipment for Nefertiti's illusions. Don't make a sound, don't move, I've sensed a truly powerful psychic energy. This person is even more powerful than the 2 swordsmen who entered Coldwater Fort a few days ago. No, much more powerful. This person is a truly ruthless character. If we capture him and mummify him, he'll become our champion. In their shared sea of consciousness, Sophie stared around with her watery eyes. Rain pattered outside, while the oil lamps of Coldwater Fort were already lit for nighttime illumination. Everything seemed the same as usual. She sensed no psychic fluctuations. He's here. From now on, we must hold our breath. Sophie, can you do it? Yes. Sophie nodded vigorously. Ready. 123. Nefertiti reached out and opened the tightly closed wooden window. A strong wind blew aside the curtains, and a torrential downpour poured in. Sophie held her breath tightly. Just 3 seconds later, a pitch-black figure, treading on a flying sword, silently flew into the room from the tall bay window. Drop after drop of rain dripped slowly from his thick robes. He chuckled and turned to look at the curtains behind him. Hide behind the curtains, but remember to hide your legs. The dull black sword pierced the wall with a thud. Master King reached out to pull back the curtains, only to be greeted by a mummy bound in yellow bandages. The sword had pierced his waist, along with the wall behind him, but instead of blood, it flowed from the tattered bandages, only fine yellow sand. In utter astonishment, the mummy opened its mouth to an exaggerated degree, aimed at Master King's head, and swallowed it whole. The next second, its entire body transformed into flying sand, enveloping Master King's entire body. Chapter 180 Bloody Night, 5. King was enveloped by the sudden onslaught of yellow sand, which whipped against his face, darkening the sky. When he opened his eyes again, his surroundings had completely changed. He now stood in a vast sea of sand, flanked by several massive statues representing the 4 deities worshipped by the ancient Egyptian Empire, the Sphinx, Anubis, Horus, and Amun the Hidden. Haha, you ignorant scoundrel. You're so ignorant of your grandpa King, enjoying a mere illusion to fight him. You're truly ungrateful. Although he didn't recognize these 4 deities, true man King remained unfazed. He was a formidable swordsman who had reached the nascent soul stage. Throughout the Eastern Tang dynasty, only a handful could rival his level of cultivation. Just as the four surrounding deities rose to their feet, before they could swing their weapons, King struck his familiar starting stance again, raising his left hand high into the sky. The four ancient deities around him seemed to simultaneously enter slow motion, their movements becoming agonizingly slow. King, however, remained calm and composed, fighting with unwavering composure. He watched helplessly as the massive scepter and axe slowly slashed toward his head, yet he didn't dodge, not even blinking. A humming sound echoed from the horizon. The heavy golden scepter edged closer and closer to Master King's head. At that moment, the sky above suddenly rang with a sound of shattering glass. The previously stable space suddenly shattered, and a vast black hole appeared in the azure sky above the endless sea of sand. It was Master King's black flying sword that shattered the illusion. The lightless flying sword flew through the hole, landing securely in Master King's grasp, just as the golden scepter was about to strike Master King's head. The flying sword of an isolating sword cultivator is indeed an effective countermeasure for an illusionist, but if you can defeat me so easily, you're underestimating a nascent soul cultivator from the eastern lands of the Tang dynasty. With that, King didn't dodge, but instead, wielding his black sword, launched a counterattack against the Sphinx beside him. The black sword, upon contact with its marble form, instantly shredded it into a pile of sand. Then, soaring through the air, it pierced Anubis's head behind it. The slender head was no match for the lightning-fast blow. The two remaining statues, Horus and Amun, simultaneously raised their hands, one radiating a dazzling golden light, while the other condensed a profound darkness between its hands. The gods who could alter the laws of heaven and earth were all ancient gods of immense power. Facing the combined attack of the two ancient gods, Master King chuckled softly, his brow unfazed. The black sword adjusted its angle and swiftly struck Amun's waist, about to utterly destroy the statue when, from the sand behind Master King, a transparent scorpion, barely the length of a finger, suddenly emerged. Little sister, watch carefully. All of this is just a cover within the illusion. Only this poisonous scorpion lurking in the sand is the core of the formation. The art of formations is ultimately about deception. The key to victory lies in the element of surprise. The slender, transparent scorpion wasn't particularly fast. It scurried across the yellow sand at a swift pace, leaping high at the moment the black sword precisely shattered Amun. In midair, it unsheathed its stinger, aiming it at Master King's unprotected back. The dull black sword was still too far away, leaving Master King no chance to resist. Just as the scorpion was about to strike, Master King spoke again. Such petty tactics are nothing to worry about. The tone of his words was completely different from before. This voice was thin and crisp, like the murmur of a child. At the same time, a condensed phantom emerged from Master King's body. It half-crouched, pointed its lips at the scorpion in the air, and gently blew out a ball of five-colored fire. The soaring flames easily incinerated the venomous scorpion in the air to ash. The venomous scorpion was the core of the illusionary scroll. With its destruction, the once stable illusion shattered like the fragments of a century-old oil painting. When King opened his eyes again, he had returned to Sophie's room. The black sword faithfully followed him into his grasp. By this point, King had largely shed his contempt for the unknown foreign illusionist. If he hadn't cultivated the five-color nascent soul, he might not have escaped this disaster. This illusionist might not be incredibly powerful, but he possessed considerable combat experience. He used the sand zombie standing behind the curtains to pull himself into the environment. He then used several ancient gods as cover to shield the venomous scorpion in the sea of sand. Upon realizing his tactic had failed, he immediately shattered the illusion without hesitation. He was clearly trying to return to reality and launch another attack. The two giant cultivators from the Chamber of Commerce perished at the hands of such an enemy. It was truly not a loss. Quickly adjusting his thick robes, King released his spiritual sense, but detected no psychic fluctuations within the room. After exiting the woman's bedroom, black sword in hand, he found the entire castle shrouded in darkness. No, just now, when I entered the village, it was unusually bustling. How come it's completely silent in just a moment? He casually split open several wooden doors nearby and found the castle completely empty. He walked all the way to the banquet hall, the empty space shrouded in darkness. The only sound he could hear was the patter of rain outside. Haha, I see I'm still in this illusion. This illusionist's skills are quite impressive. The nascent soul emerged from his body once again, and with 2 fingers raised in front of him, the transparent figure once again blew out a blazing stream of psychic fire. The illusory scroll, burned by the pure elements, once again burned a large hole. However, when Master King returned to the real world, he was surprised to find the Hanshu Fort banquet hall filled with fully armed English soldiers. They had drawn their weapons and surrounded him in full battle formation. At his feet lay 3 charred corpses. Chapter 181 Bloody Night, 6. Honestly, it wasn't Nefertiti's original intention to lure King into the banquet hall. It was simply that, in the illusion, she had discovered this Eastern Continent cultivator was far too powerful. Knowing her own solar illusions could no longer threaten him, the best strategy was to lure him away, allowing him to strike down others while she fled. However, Marine Captain Lytas was undoubtedly unaware of what had transpired. Lytas cast a cold gaze at the dark-haired, dark-eyed Eastern Continent cultivator not far away. At the same time, he discreetly glanced at Duke Bernard, who was not far away. Seeing Bernard's bewildered expression, completely unaware of what had happened, he realized this wasn't a conspiracy orchestrated by him and Loki alone. For a Viking lord to command a powerful Eastern Continent cultivator to serve him was like an ant commanding a dragon to build its nest. It was completely unrealistic. Judging from his appearance, this man was undoubtedly a Tang Dynasty native. Although these people were arrogant, they entered the banquet hall without a word and immediately began to breathe fire and kill people. Such exaggerated behavior was unprecedented for Lytas. England values trade and worships the Holy Bishop. The Holy Bishop's doctrine overly emphasizes law and justice, which cannot produce many powerful warriors. Even the Pope's personal guard, the Crusaders, is by no means a formidable force in the world. Simply discussing the combat capabilities of the English ground forces, they do have their shortcomings. Normally, he would be unable to defeat such a powerful Tang Dynasty swordsman. Even if Lytas casually injured someone, he would only express strong objection and dare not resist. But today, in the same hall, there were 3 dragon riders from the Kingdom of Wessex. These people were not to be trifled with in any way. Oderziv was not a typical Western beauty. She was tall and sturdy. At 24 years old, she was 1.8 meters tall and weighed over 240 pounds. Putting aside her appearance, her formidable height and weight alone distinguished her from most blonde, blue-eyed English women. Furthermore, her skin had large pores and her features were unrefined. Her face bore many Western Persian characteristics, largely due to her biological mother, a pleasure slave in the Wessex military camp. While the 7 kingdoms of the English Isles, founded on maritime trade, were modest in combat power, their wealth afforded them unrivaled military welfare. This was especially true of the wealthy Wessex dynasty, where most military camps were equipped with on-site opium dens and small dining halls where soldiers could spend their pay. Slave prostitutes were no exception. These prostitutes often gave birth to orphans whose biological fathers were unknown. Most of these children were adopted by the Church of England and sent to its affiliated orphanages for upbringing. Oderziv was raised in this way. The monks and the church had no time to name these orphans. Oder, who lived in Camp 14, shared the same name as over 200 other children. 14. Wessex, though wealthy, never supported idlers, especially those who should never have been born. The best fate for orphans admitted to the orphanage was to be adopted by citizens unable to have children. However, if no one adopted them after the age of 8, the church would send them to mercenary training camps, where they received rigorous technical and tactical training. Upon reaching adulthood, they were sold into the army. Schooling was a complete non-existence for these rootless orphans. In the affluent and civilized city of Wessex, citizens have human rights was enshrined in the Constitution. However, for orphans who were not citizens, the concept of human rights was completely unattainable. The training methods employed on the mercenary training camps were inherited from the Spartan city-state of 500 years ago. These orphans, as young as 8, had to complete the same intensive training as 16-year-old citizens before they could even receive bread and food. Most orphans who entered the training camp didn't survive past the age of 10 yet. It was precisely this 1 in 10 chance that Oderziv managed to survive. Her physique was superior to that of an average person. The food in the training camp wasn't much better than that of a serf, but Oderziv, with this extremely limited sustenance, grew strong and muscular. Like a tenacious desert plant, she eagerly absorbed the meager nutrients and grew rapidly. Furthermore, she possessed an exceptional fighting talent. With a steel sword in hand, Relying solely on her muscles and her God-given brutal martial arts, she could unleash devastation on the training grounds. By the age of 12, she was unrivaled in the mercenary training camp, even holding her own against the instructors in the camp. Upon discovering Odo's fighting prowess, the church didn't sell her off, but instead funded her training at the War College in Constantinople. Odo Ziv spent 10 years at the War College. No one knows what she endured during those 10 years. But upon returning to Wessex, her demeanor completely changed. Egbert surprisingly gifted her with dragon blood, granting her the qualifications to challenge the dragons and become the kingdom's foremost warrior, a dragon rider. Across all the nations of the Western continent, becoming a dragon rider is the ultimate honor. For only nations possess the ability to tame these terrifying ancient creatures. Across all the nations of the Western continent, there are fewer than 100 dragon riders. Dragon riders are honored guests of royalty wherever they go, and in the eyes of mortals, they are like gods. However, dragons are not so easy to tame. Just as humans wouldn't appreciate a monkey riding on their necks to show off their power, dragons, these ancient and powerful creatures, are far from being as docile as horses. Even though the dragons that still exist are now many times weaker than their ancient ancestors, they refuse to be controlled by humans. To tame them, they must first be defeated. Before facing the dragons, Odo Ziv's life hadn't encountered any significant obstacles. But once she stood before a dragon, her hellish mode of life finally began. Odo excelled at defensive counterattacks, so for her first encounter with a dragon, she chose a massive obsidian tower shield. However, upon entering the fray, she discovered that humans were completely defenseless against a dragon. Her path in warfare had given her physical prowess 10 times superior to that of an average human, but upon entering the fray, she was brutally crushed. Amidst the flames of the dragon's breath, she held her shield for just 10 seconds before it melted into a pile of scrap metal. Seeing her shield ineffective, Odo launched an all-out attack. However, the dragon's tough scales and immense strength left her no advantage in close combat. After barely 10 breaths, she was shattered and carried out. This injury took her nearly a year to recover. A year later, Odo made her second attempt, but after holding on for a quarter of an hour, she was bitten by the dragon in the left leg. The entire leg was nearly ripped apart. Had she not been a War Order 2 God of War warrior, she would have been permanently disabled. Yet, she refused to give up. Most reserve dragon riders who attempt dragon taming only last 2 or 3 years at most. If they could still save their lives after 3 attempts, most would choose to cherish them. After all, they were all high-sequence experts, and job opportunities abounded. Just turn left and you could easily secure an officer rank above the rank of 1000 captain, often with extremely generous compensation. Odo was an exception. Despite constant injuries and recovery, she persevered for 6 years. Her level of determination and perseverance is rare in the 1000+ years since the emergence of dragon riders. Finally, she succeeded. At the age of 28, she finally defeated and tamed the dragon, becoming a dragon rider. The expedition to Scandinavia was her first battle. Riding a dragon, belching flames, she watched the struggling bodies beneath her turn to ash in an instant. In just one day, she felt a glimpse of the transformation from mortal to god. Arriving in Hanshu village, the respectful and courteous reception of the village chief made even the orphan Odo feel very comfortable. But now, this seemingly ordinary man from Eastland actually dared to attack and injure people in public, surrounded by a room full of English soldiers as if nothing had happened. This feeling made her very, very, very unhappy. Chapter 182 Bloody Night, 7. With a resounding swish, Odo drew his sword. The towering woman, nearly 2 meters tall, carried a sword nearly 5 feet long, a gift from Egbert upon her canonization as a king's knight. With a roar, she leaped onto the dining table. The Eastlander seemed to utter a few words, but Odo, throttled by the throbbing pain of intense rage, heard nothing. A single thought swirled through her mind: I am a dragon knight bathed in dragon blood. I must defend the king's honor. I will slay this wicked man who slaughtered my people in public. With a deep sigh, King Zhenren raised his left hand again. The dull black sword flew head-on at the charging Odo. Undeterred by the flying sword, the fierce woman roared and slashed. But at that moment, the flying sword strangely accelerated. The slow-moving black sword, upon approaching Odo, surged tenfold in just a tenth of a second. It transformed into a beam of light, nearly invisible to the human eye, and instantly struck Odo's forehead. Odo 14's eyes widened. In that instant, time seemed to slow to a crawl. She watched helplessly as the flying sword slowly approached, piercing her forehead. She tried to block, but even if the muscles in her arms ripped apart, she couldn't penetrate the incoming black sword. A dazzling spray of blood suddenly exploded in the brightly lit banquet hall. In the center of the spray, a lightless black shadow continued to dance, circling the room before landing steadily in the hands of Master King. Aodro 14's head was shattered into a pile of bloody debris. A Sequence 2 Saint Bishop demigod couldn't even hold out for a second in the hands of a nascent soul cultivator. "I didn't mean to kill you, but you forced me to, and I can't help it," he spoke slowly, gently flicking the remaining blood from the black sword. It wasn't until a moment later that the raging, rude English soldiers in the hall fell to the ground like weed under a scythe. Shocked and enraged, Lytas realized that the flying sword, after circling the room, had already pierced every one of their throats. Thick blood flowed, turning the floor into a nearly sea of gore. The temperature in the room was rapidly dropping. The English soldiers, who had been shouting and shouting just moments before, were now silent. Having grown up on this continent, they had seen many Tang Dynasty swordsmen, but they had never seen anyone like this one, who had mastered the art of killing like magic. Master King's sudden attack brought the two sides to a brief standoff. Just as Lytas was about to speak, he suddenly heard the clamor of gongs and drums, and the high-pitched, cracked voice of a gong. Clang clang clang. "Come on, grab your weapons, someone wants to assassinate our respected Captain Lytas. All the brave English soldiers, let us take up our weapons and sing the hymn, fight them with me, long live the king." The flying fish clipper anchored on the sea not far from Hanshu village also heard the loud sound of gongs and drums. The middle-aged man with a dignified face rushed to the bow of the boat immediately after hearing the loud gongs and drums and noisy shouting in the village. His eyes were full of deep worry. Unlike King Henrin, who is only responsible for killing thugs, this shopkeeper named Hai Bingfu is not only a sword cultivator, but also the shopkeeper of Izumo Trading Company in the Kingdom of Wessex. Long before entering the village, he had seen the giant dragon descending from the sky and the fleet belonging to the Kingdom of Mercia. He knew that the Vikings were at war with the English at this time. According to the original plan, the Shushan sword cultivator with extremely superb killing skills would not be able to miss after entering the village, but now he actually woke up the guards in the village and was surrounded. Shopkeeper Hai had to react quickly. This reaction is called killing to silence. Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria are all partners of our Izumo Trading Company. We can earn hundreds of thousands of taels of silver every year from these countries. If a scandal occurs where Tang Dynasty sword cultivators casually kill soldiers, our business cannot withstand such a blow. All monks, listen to my orders. From now on, surround the village and kill all foreigners who try to escape from the village. Whether they are Vikings or English, we must not let a single person escape from Hanshu village alive. The utter annihilation of a village was hardly surprising, especially considering the two nations were currently engaged in war. Shopkeeper Hai knew that with Master King's strength, massacring the village would be easy for him. However, he was a lone warrior, and as the soldiers began to flee, he was bound to make mistakes. Any English soldier who managed to escape and report the Tang Dynasty sword cultivators' arbitrary slaughter of soldiers could cause a major diplomatic incident. The sword cultivators employed by the Izumo Trading Company immediately understood shopkeeper Hai's intentions. After all, they had left their homes to serve as thugs in a foreign land. Over the years, they had engaged in numerous shady acts, including murder and robbery. Several sword cultivators swiftly emerged from their ships and flew towards the vicinity of Hanshu village. The center of the village was now a sea of fire. After casually stabbing the naval captain Lytas with his flying sword, Master King began to slaughter the remaining soldiers in the banquet hall. He slowly paced towards the city gate, killing nearly 10 men with one step. As he left Coldwater Castle, his first glance was towards Sophie's boudoir upstairs. He knew the illusionist who had drawn him into the illusion was still lurking somewhere in the castle. But before he could deal with the illusionist, he needed to confront two even more formidable foes, the two dragons that now stood before him. The two dragon riders, atop the dragons, had narrowly escaped death after relieving themselves after drinking too much. Hearing the shrieks of agony from the castle, they quickly summoned the dragons that roosted outside the village. The two dragon riders now sat atop the 50-meter-long dragons, their sharp, horned heads pointed at the ant-like king master beneath them. A scorching stream of fire erupted, pouring down upon him like a raging hurricane of flame. King remained calm and composed. He didn't dodge, nor did he resist. Just as the flames were about to touch his skin, the five-colored wielding within him emerged. Its skin, as smooth as a newborn's, opened its delicate, pink mouth. The sky-high flames transformed into a stream, swallowing it like a dragon. Hey, such pure spiritual energy. I gladly accept it. Amidst a crisp, sweet laugh, the wielding boy revealed a sinister smile. Typing 3 times a day part-time is too tiring. Let's prioritize quality. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 Bloody Night, 8. The nascent soul is the process by which a cultivator's spiritual energy undergoes a qualitative transformation. This step seemed like a fairy tale to all the chosen ones of the Western continent. They simply could not comprehend how a human could allow the spiritual energy flowing freely within their bodies to develop into intelligence, and even reside stably within the sea of consciousness within their brains without escaping. Many Sequence 1 true gods within the temples could not achieve this. In a sense, true man-king was a deity to the chosen ones of the Western continent. And now, the first to fall under the divine butcher's knife was the mightiest black dragon. After the five-color nascent soul withstood the dragon's breath flames, the lightless black sword soared once more. The mere 2-foot-long flying sword transformed into a violent whirlwind, directly twisting the dragon rider on its back into a bloody mist. Without the dragon rider's control, the dragon faced king and unleashed another ball of fire. However, the energy fluctuations of fire, composed of a single element, could not harm the five-color nascent soul. The violent, fiery element was absorbed into the nascent soul's body, vanishing as if into thin air. The black dragon, too, possessed an intelligent being. Having never encountered such a situation before, the giant dragon tilted its massive head and fell into a moment of confusion. However, taking advantage of this brief moment of opportunity, the flying sword circled the horizon and flew back towards it. Having accumulated sufficient momentum, the flying sword easily sliced through the black dragon's scales and pierced its flesh. Then, like a whirlwind of metal, it tore through the black dragon's flesh. Boiling dragon blood dripped from the black dragon's wound onto the ground in Hanshu village square. The rain quickly washed the blood away, and soon, nearly the entire village was bathed in its blood. For Master King, slaying 2 dragons was merely a minor waste of time. As the 2 dragons fell dead, Loki, standing on the rooftop of Hanshu Castle amidst the pouring rain, slowly lowered the gong and drew his great axe. In war, the weaker side needs a chance to muddy the waters and reset the deck. For days, he had waited for this moment. He waited for these Tang Dynasty sword cultivators to return to his village. As a Chi countryman in his previous life, Loki understood the weight of the imperial seal in the hearts of these Tang Dynasty merchants. 3 months ago, at the docks of Conqueror's fortress, he had drawn his axe and dispatched a Tang Dynasty sword cultivator who had followed him. He knew then that these powerful figures, who dominated the Western continent with the arrogance of business, would not let him go. And now, they had indeed arrived. According to the battle plan agreed upon by Loki and the remaining villagers, when he struck the gongs and drums, everyone was to follow suit and make a noise. In 10 days, he had taught every resident of Hanshu village 2 simple English phrases, kill them and for the king. After a chaotic commotion with the gongs and drums, even though the rain was pouring outside, the drunken English soldiers rushed out of their homes, swords drawn. Bloody axe in hand, Loki leaped from the rooftop. Hidden in the castle's shadows, he gently insulated his right arm with a tiny cut. The village's central square was now covered in a thick carpet of corpses. A torrential downpour poured down from the sky, coating the ground in a pool of crimson blood. A single drop of his blood melted into the ground, instantly activating the pool. Dragon blood, imbued with immense psychic energy, rapidly rose into a thick mist. Within the fiery mist, faint golden ripples shone. This was a new power unleashed by his drinking the blood of Yum, the sun sacrifice. The thick blood mist rapidly spread from the surface, obscuring the sky and covering the entire village within a minute. Seeing this, the villagers knew the battle had entered what the village chief had described as the second phase. At this point, each of them retreated to their own gadhan, axes raised, guarding the entrance. No matter who tried to crawl through the doorway, whether they were English sailors or Storm's End shield axemen, no questions, no words, just a blow to the face. As for Loki, He could clearly sense every heartbeat within the bloody mist. By this time, Latus was dead, and he began to act as the officer's command. Comrades, the demon who killed our commander Latus is right here with us. Let us form a shield wall and jointly resist these sword cultivators from the Tang dynasty. He's already slain a dragon, and his strength must be running low. Think of the rewards the Lord will bestow upon us by slaughtering powerful pagans. For our rank, for our future, for our respected king, charge. For the king, the English soldiers, fueled by alcohol, knew no fear. They raised their shields, formed a formation, and slowly approached the center of the square. Loki extended his left hand, revealing the complex portal rune on his palm. Golden ripples, dotted within the blood mist, flew into his palm. A moment later, a massive gate swung open from his palm, and 6 fallen titans, clad in pitch black, emerged from the portal. Loki knew the immense power of this swordsman, who had slain 2 dragons in quick succession. Even 8,000 of the remaining English soldiers, let alone the 1,000 or so remaining in the village, would likely be no match for this swordsman's flying swords. Every one of them was mere cannon fodder. To truly slay this formidable foe, he would have to rely on his indestructible blood axe and these 6 fallen titans, transformed by the blood creator. Haha. You're such losers. Since you wish to meet your end at my hands, King will accept. Visibility within the blood mist was less than a meter, and in the pitch-black darkness, King released his nascent soul. They stood back to back, their 5-color nascent souls guarding him. He raised his hands and freely controlled his flying swords, striking with abandon. With him as the center, dull black blades flew in a chaotic circle. The tower shields and steel armor of ordinary soldiers were no match for the indestructible blades. It took less than 10 minutes. Aside from the patter of rain, there was no sound around him. Shopkeeper High, something unusual has happened. You can come and clean up now. Wiping the blood from his face, Master King raised his left hand and sheathed his flying sword. After a long wait, he frowned, realizing there was no response to his telepathic message. I've been careless and killed too many. Shopkeeper High, if you don't come soon, it'll be dawn soon. Can you hear me? Master King raised his voice unconsciously. The ability of transmitting secret sound is available to cultivators who have completed the foundation building stage. Shopkeeper High must have reached the golden core stage. It's impossible for him not to hear the words he transmitted. However, Master King didn't know that Shopkeeper High, caught on the heavy rain, was already caught in an even more dangerous situation. Chapter 184 Bloody Night, 9. The greatest joy in the world is to slay the powerful and then mummify them. This is the fundamental principle of warfare for the chosen of Anubis, and, of course, the path chosen by the vast majority of high priests. In our kingdom, nearly everyone chooses a particular life to undergo training with the Styx priests, becoming the chosen of Anubis. There's a single reason: mummies are the most effective soldiers in the world. Amidst the pouring rain, a golden figure, like a nimble cat, darted through the cracks in the roof like a nimble cat. It was Sophie, donning the mask of Horus and activating the power of the sun cult. Of course, Nefertiti was still controlling this body. We couldn't defeat that ruthless guy just now, but now I think I sense a group of weaker flying men closing in on us. Oh, I love a downpour. Hurry, let's run. Don't let these darlings get away. Although Nefertiti had reincarnated twice through ancient Egyptian magic, in her previous life, in 1370 BCE, the Chinese mainland was still in the Zhou dynasty. This was over 700 years before the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period, when various schools of thought emerged. In her previous life, she had witnessed Gorgons roaming the Aegean Sea, axe-wielding minotaurs, soaring thunderbirds, and cyclops. But she had never seen these powerful swordsmen soaring on their swords. Wearing a golden mask of the god Horus, 2 eyes of Horus gleaming with sunlight easily pierced the blood mist. Now, she could see the Tang dynasty swordsman, hovering in the sky not far in front of her, atop a flying sword. With a soft whistle, the mummy transformed by Master Irithil, the Storm Lord, leaped from the blood mist onto the roof of a Calhan. He let out a deep roar, facing the Tang swordsman in the sky. 2 other mummies within the blood mist charged out like cannonballs. They were Irithil's 2 disciples. Sister, watch me carefully as I fight with these treasures. When I find my own mummy in a new home, you must learn how to protect yourself in this chaotic world. In my opinion, your father is also a troublesome person. The Tang swordsman's orders were to execute anyone who fled the village. Heavy rain fell from the sky, and a blood mist swirled throughout the village. Despite extremely low visibility, he spotted a tall figure surging from the blood mist and instinctively stabbed the man's head with his flying sword. The flying sword didn't pierce through his skull as he'd imagined, instead lodging with a thud in the hard skull. It felt like piercing a dry, rotten log. Furious, the sword cultivator pulled back with his fingers, attempting to free the flying sword. However, the mummy's old, withered body held no moisture. After piercing flesh like dry cotton wool, the lightweight flying sword, lacking effective lubrication, struggled to be pulled along by the thin psychic filaments. Furthermore, the mummy's massive hands gripped the hilt, firmly securing the flying sword within its skull. The sword cultivator immediately felt a piercing, murderous intent. With a soft swish, he drew his sword. At that moment, a crow in the sky, wrapped in rags, suddenly transformed from a bird into human form. It descended from mid-air, its legs swathed in black bandages clamping around the sword cultivator's head, its waist and abdomen thrashing with force. With a crisp snap, the Tang Kingdom swordsman, caught off guard by the sudden neck-strangling attack, fell from mid-air. 80% of the swordsman's skills lay in his flying sword. Without it, he stood no chance in close combat against Irithil, who possessed both the Raven and Berserker paths. Master Irithil, swathed in bandages, his entire body exposed only a pair of crimson eyes, gripped the swordsman's neck tightly, his jaws gaping as he landed. A swarm of black insects immediately poured from his abdomen into the swordsman's mouth and nose. He struggled for only a few seconds before his body twitched twice and, as if dead, he fell completely motionless. Big Black, carry him. Let's go kill the next one. Floating in midair, Shopkeeper High gazed at the increasingly thick blood mist over the village, and also at the nearly 500 Viking corpses lying at his feet. Shopkeeper High's eyes held no trace of pity. He had no idea why these heavily armed Viking shield axemen had ambushed him in this dense forest, and frankly, he didn't want to find out. He didn't have the time. The most time-efficient and energy-saving way to deal with unexpected enemies was to manipulate their flying swords and slice them into pieces. Shopkeeper High, accompanied by 3 giant and stage sword cultivators on either side, reduced them to corpses in less than an instant's stick of time. Each had a bloody hole the size of a bowl on his forehead. Each one was killed with a single strike. He didn't have much time to deal with these Viking shield axemen. After all, they still had to tightly surround the village to prevent any escapees. After slaughtering all of Bernard's warriors, they immediately returned to their positions. After a while, Shopkeeper High gently asked, Ningqi, Juyan, are there any deserters in your area? This skill, known as telepathic communication, is a unique method of communication among East Continent sword cultivators, and its principles are the same as those of controlling flying swords. Flying swords are able to fly because cultivators condense the spiritual energy accumulated within their bodies into a beam, connecting it to a flying sword forged from their own blood. It's like a sword cultivator possessing an extra invisible arm to control the flight of a flying sword. Sword cultivators are divided into different levels based on the purity of their spiritual energy. The more abundant the spiritual energy, the stronger the spiritual pressure, and the further this invisible arm can reach and possess greater power. Sound transmission works the same way. By manipulating the spiritual energy within, they compress the originally evenly diffused sound waves into a beam, transmitting them in the direction of their allies. The stronger the spiritual pressure, the farther the transmission distance. However, nearly an instant's stick of time passed, and no sound was transmitted back from the 2 sword cultivators stationed to his left and right. Shopkeeper High felt a flicker of worry. He remembered that 14 days ago, 2 giant and stage sword cultivators had departed for Hanshu village and had not been heard from since. As he pondered this, he caught sight of 2 dark figures flying out of the faint blood mist surrounding the village. Who are you? Shopkeeper High asked clearly. But neither of the 2 flying swords answered. Shopkeeper High looked toward them hesitantly. When he smelled a stench like that of a rotting corpse, he wanted to flee, but it was too late. In the cold moonlight, he could clearly see the 2 men's faces. Their heads had lost their human form, stretched to resemble those of dogs. Because they had only recently transformed into corpses, their bodies still held some rotten flesh. Shopkeeper High thrust his flying sword into the chest of the living kobold, but found it unaffected, accelerating towards him. Help! Help me, the kobold pleaded with Shopkeeper High with its remaining wits. However, Shopkeeper High, now vulnerable, was unable to mount any effective counterattack. Only one thought remained in his mind: escape. Now, immediately. Get away from the Siri village as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, Nefertiti, capable of serving both as a sun priestess and a pharaoh, far outstripped the young shopkeeper Hai's combat experience. A few days ago, a Tang dynasty swordsman who had been recruited into her fold had been upgraded from a common mummy to an Anubis warrior due to his exceptional psychic abilities. These powerful undead soldiers were considered treasures by the ancient Egyptian nobility. Only those chosen by the gods who possessed sufficient psychic energy in their lifetime could join the Anubis Legion. Once successfully cultivated, these powerful undead soldiers possessed immense strength and tough skin. They even possessed numerous forbidden necromancy spells from the Book of the Dead. Even individually, they were extremely powerful. Nefertiti was so interested in these swordsmen because, with them, she could form a small Anubis army. Once these powerful dog-headed undead were complete, this small army of 9 Anubis warriors would be more than enough to crush most of Nefertiti's chosen ones of her rank. This army would also be her greatest asset in her future quest to discover her true form. Chapter 185 Bloody Night, 10. Loki, currently engaged in battle in the center of the village, had no idea what was happening on the outskirts of the village. In his mind, Sophie was still that innocent 5-year-old. She should have been hiding in the closet, clutching her doll, as he had promised. In troubled times, human life was worthless. As a lord, he couldn't afford to focus too much attention on a child. If his daughter died in battle, there was nothing he could do. During the turbulent medieval times, countless civilians perished in the flames of war every year. The children of lords were no exception. Loki faced even greater trouble. The blood mist in the center of the village was so thick he couldn't see his hand in front of him. Within the mist, he could sense the 2 dead dragons, like ice frozen in the blazing sun. Their entire bodies seemed to be rising, melting, transforming into pure energy elements that merged into the blood mist. Faint golden ripples rippled around the dragon corpses. It was almost certain that this was a new ability he had unintentionally developed after drinking Yamu's blood. This ability, combined with the dragon blood on the ground and the torrential rain from the sky, propelled his power to a new level. Wailing cries echoed around him from time to time. He could sense the rapidly dwindling hearts within the blood mist. Of the over 1,500 English soldiers brought to Tarth, only 200 remained. Most of them were disguised as corpses and lying where they were, their companions having perished at the hands of the murderous Master King. Loki gripped his bloody axe, knowing it was his turn to strike. This was a strategic move. This time, he couldn't pack all the pregnant women and children in the village into the sunken city as he had done in the Battle of Hanshu village. With the children and pregnant women forced to remain in the village, he simply couldn't stand up to the 2,000 English soldiers stationed there. A single strike would surely result in a river of blood. Now, the most threatening dragon rider and dragon were dead, and the corpses of the English soldiers practically filled the square. The powerful swordsman's job was complete. He could die. With a gentle wave of his hand, the 6 fallen titans standing neatly beside him launched themselves forward, charging towards 2 masses of pale golden psychic energy. That was where Master King and his nascent soul were located. Transformed by the Crimson Creator, the fallen titans had completely lost the ability to speak and breathe. They raised their axes and charged silently. Soundlessly, without a trace. Yet Master King was aware of their presence. With a slight flick of his fingertips, psychic energy controlled swords from the horizon to strike the fallen titans like meteorites. However, the agility of these warriors completely exceeded Master King's expectations. The fallen titans, their bodies completely transformed, moved in a manner completely unlike that of humans. They could suddenly bend their bodies into a slab of steel while sprinting, their legs undiminished. Even when forced to evade an attack, they would sacrifice unimportant parts, such as their forearms or hands, to mitigate the damage, protecting their legs and core, allowing them to continue running and approach their target. These were cold, mechanical creatures, intent only on faithfully carrying out a Crimson Apostle's orders. The order was to rush to Master King and embrace him tightly. Haha, interesting. Very interesting. Master King maintained his composure. He stood calmly, his face impassive, not even raising his eyelids. The western continent was filled with countless demonic cultivators of various sects and forms. Having served as the chief thug for Izumo Trading Company for many years, he didn't have the energy to catalog their diverse fighting styles and abilities. Inevitably, all these bizarrely chosen ones would eventually become corpses. Boom, boom, boom. Though blinded by the thick blood mist, Master King could hear the heavy footsteps of the fallen titan approaching. The flying sword took a considerable time to regain momentum after crashing into the ground. As the fallen titan drew closer, the nascent soul, previously guarding behind him, proudly stood before him. Gleaming with a five-colored light, its entire body was composed of pure spiritual energy. It took a deep breath, and as its abdomen contracted, the nascent soul's body rapidly transformed from transparent air into a blazing stream of fire. In just 3 breaths, it had completely transformed its elemental body into a fire spirit. Then, the blazing flames burned a vast, empty hole through the boundless blood-red fog. This was a powerful elemental attack unleashed only by spiritual beings born from heaven and earth, a psychic burning comparable to the power of dragon breath. If a mortal were to come into contact with this fire, not only would their flesh but also the soul within them be consumed by the spiritual fire. In the 20 years since retreating from the mountain, True Man King had never encountered a human who had survived this psychic burning, but fallen titans were not human. They lacked souls, and even their bodies resembled machines, more like humans than humans. The blazing flames burned their bodies, emitting a terrifying sizzling sound, but their skin only turned from black to red, without a single sign of melting. Despite the flames spewing from their nascent soul, they sped up, leaping high as they approached the body of King Zhenrun. Then, throwing away their axe, they extended their arms. By this point in the battle, King could no longer maintain his composure. He'd fought countless battles in his life, and had seen many desperate men willing to die with him, but what was this, risking their lives to hold him? With a tap of his toes, he leaped backward, floating lightly in the air, his demeanor like an immortal. But at that moment, a massive axe suddenly materialized from the thick blood mist behind him. Silently, it sliced through the surrounding air, slashing straight towards King in midair. The flying sword was still tens of meters away. And now, suspended in midair, he had no leverage. The devastating blow struck his neck in a flash of lightning. It was Loki, sprinting through the blood mist and entering a state of nothingness, seizing the perfect moment to deliver the fatal blow. He knew that once he entered a state of nothingness, he would be an invincible gas against King's flying sword. Absorbing sufficient spiritual energy, the blood axe, capable of piercing even Leviathan skin, effortlessly decapitated King's head. As the head fell to the ground, Loki, having just returned to his physical form from nothingness, lifted his 43-yard-long foot. Puff! King's head, like a juicy watermelon, was instantly crushed under his foot. Chapter 186 Bloody Night, 11. The torrential downpour continued unabated, and the boundless blood mist that filled Hanshu village persisted. Loki fiercely wiped the blood from his face. He looked down at his feet. The shattered skull, shattered by his foot, was stuck to the sole of his shoe from the force of his foot. It took 3 shakes before it finally detached. A shattered eyeball, a tangled mess of white brain matter, and a half-squashed tongue were the only visible objects amidst the snow-white debris. Tang State Sword Cultivator. That's it, this battle seemed too easy. Loki had a clear understanding of his own strength. The blood axe, infused with psychic energy, could sever anything. This rule had become almost a theorem after countless battles. Loki wasn't surprised that the blood axe could decapitate this man. But his head, crushed like a piece of tofu under his own foot, was crushed like tofu. Is this, my strength isn't exaggerated, but a normal human skull wouldn't be this flexible. Gripping the bloody axe tightly in both hands, he stared intently at the headless corpse standing still not far away, not daring to relax even a moment. A moment later, the headless corpse suddenly extended its left arm, and the dull black sword flew back into its grasp. The bony left hand aimed the blade at its chest, then gently slashed through the silken, open-fronted gown. A tiny, armless, legless figure, resembling a withered infant, slowly emerged from the corpse of Master King. Hey, for a hairy savage, you've accomplished a remarkable feat by being able to see my true form before you die. As the rain poured down, the tiny figure who had floated from the headless corpse spoke in a thin, feminine voice. His withered head, long without sunlight, had taken on a bone-deep paleness. After flying out of the corpse, its limbs immediately collapsed to the ground due to the loss of support. Upon seeing the original form, the Yuanying, no different from an ordinary human, suddenly disappeared into the space between his eyebrows. The armless and legless human stick instantly radiated a 5-color divine light. 30 years ago, I was struck by a sudden disaster. On my way back from Takharistan to Longayao Road, my entire family was killed, and I was captured by a group of Sogdian bandits. They chopped off my limbs and used me as a plaything. From that day on, I swore that if I could survive this catastrophe, I would kill every foreigner who dared to disrespect the Tang people. 20 years have passed, and today is the first time I've emerged from the body of a Mahist puppet. Haha, this is truly a wonderful experience. I didn't even want to kill you so quickly, but it's a pity you couldn't understand me. The dwarf, barely half a meter tall, sighed after saying this. A breeze suddenly blew through the blood mist. Before Loki could react, the 6 fallen titans on standby exploded into a pool of blood. And without warning, his right arm, along with a bloody axe within it, fell to the ground. Wide-eyed, he stared blankly at the familiar yet unfamiliar arm in the dirt. On it, lines of cuneiform writing, like product numbers, were rapidly disappearing. Only then did the piercing pain wash over him like a tide. Damn, what kind of sorcery is this? No warning, no opening move, not even a flying sword. As he spoke, a gentle breeze blew through the sky and earth. The next second, all 6 fallen titans exploded. And my right arm and I slipped apart with a silky motion. Is this the power of a Tang Dynasty swordsman? Sudden, dimensional devastation. Loki immediately realized he had made a grave mistake. He had completely underestimated the importance of the Imperial Seal in the eyes of these Tang Dynasty merchants. To seize this treasured national treasure, lost for nearly 600 years, they had actually sent a truly formidable weapon to his village. This fellow was completely different from the half-baked immortal cultivator he'd slain on the Conqueror's fortress docks. Before him, 1,500 English soldiers and 3 dragons were like floating clouds, unable to even force his true form out. And now, having truly laid eyes on King's true form, he finally witnessed a might of this plane's ultimate powerhouse. Loki gritted his teeth and advanced instead of retreating. From birth, his life had been a series of brutal battles. Years of bloody battles had taught him a simple truth: when facing a powerful enemy, never flee. Turning your back to the enemy is far less effective than taking up arms and fighting to the death. If you can't even defeat the enemy head-on, don't even expect to escape by turning your back. Just as Loki launched his charge, a radiant figure appeared high in the sky. The path of justice is surrounded by tyrannical evil, and the Templars will guide the people through the canyon of death. The holy prayer of judgment rang out. Jerome spread his white wings and rose into the rainy night. After ascending, he raised his silver sword. Several rays of holy light pierced the thick blood mist, temporarily illuminating the church square with daylight. Behind him, Bishop Lawrence of Light raised his staff and chanted another prayer. Flame, born from the eternal passing of light. When light dies and flames rise, the Seraph Michael will wield the holy sword scorched to rend the wounds of darkness. Light transforms into blazing fire, and the eternally burning pure flame will purify the demonic soul. I am the Holy Lord Jehovah, who incinerates all things. Today, I grant you light, heat, and holy fire from heaven. Bathed in the pure glow of flame, and feeling warmed. Then, you will call me the Holy Reckoner. After the path of holy light upgrades to sequence 6, Burner, the prayer-oriented priest, once limited to chanting gospels, gains the ability to manipulate holy fire. Now, as the Bishop of Light, Lawrence's abilities are undoubtedly even greater. The combination of divine flame of light and light of justice is a common and effective attack method used by chosen ones of the path of holy light and path of justice. When the radiance of justice pours down, high-sequence holy light monks can transform the holy light into flames by chanting gospel of holy fire. This combined skill can instantly wipe out large numbers of enemies on the battlefield. However, the king they faced at this moment could not be called a human. Haha, a human-shaped candle. Quite interesting. Despite his countless kills, being simultaneously besieged by 2 sequence 3 holy bishop chosen ones was a situation King had never encountered before. Pure white light shone on his pale skin, which had been dark for years, and tiny sparks of holy fire ignited. However, they were extinguished in an instant by the powerful spiritual pressure of the nascent soul monks. But it's all just fancy stuff, it's useless. Muttering softly, King calmly waved his hand. Another breeze blew, and Jerome in the air and Lawrence on the ground collapsed to the ground, vomiting blood. Their chests caved in, as if unintentionally. Every rib in their chest cavity had been broken. Though they only held out for a few seconds, they had bought Loki plenty of time. These few seconds of acceleration were all he needed. Once his speed increased, as long as he was within the blood mist, he could enter a state of untouchable nothingness. As Loki grasped the blood axe with his only left hand and swiftly approached Master King like a wisp of blood-colored smoke, King's expression lost its usual composure. He discovered that the sword energy he had unleashed was completely incapable of harming him. Chapter 187 Bloody Night, End. 10 meters, 5 meters. As Loki drew closer to Master King, the fierceness in his eyes grew. The last thing he saw out of the corner of his eye was Jerome and Lawrence collapsing to the ground, vomiting blood. He knew whether they were alive or dead. But he had a vague feeling that they were in grave danger. He had known the two holy bishops for only a year. Initially, they had been held hostage by him from across the sea. Of the two, Jerome had fought alongside him in bloody battles, saving Hanshu village from imminent destruction. And Lawrence, the taciturn holy light priest, had carried his cross all the way through his grand adventure into the belly of Leviathan. Loki knew in his heart that, regardless of whether his teacher and student died, he had to eliminate Master King. If he failed, the entire village would be slaughtered by this demon. 5 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters. He swung his bloody axe, forming a crimson crescent. Yet, at that moment, a hint of fear finally crossed Master King's once impassive face. His fear stemmed from the ruthless shattering of the Mahas puppet. 30 years ago, upon his return, bloodied from his escape from Takelristan, his elder brother, Master King Gain, met him in Liangzhou, finding him stuffed in a wooden box, his body severely shrunken, his arms and legs severed. Determined to help his younger brother regain his footing, King Gain invested heavily in Mokui, a leading figure of the contemporary Mahas school, to create a puppet body for him. The Mahas school possessed the most advanced puppet-making techniques in the world, and only their puppets allowed cultivators to channel their spiritual energy into fine strands, meticulously controlling each muscle. For 20 years, Master King had invested all his dividends from the Izumo Trading Company in materials and upgrades to make this puppet even more resilient. Now, this puppet, crafted from nearly every precious resource in the universe, cost at least 200,000 taels of gold per wheel, rendering it virtually invulnerable to ordinary cultivators. But the hairy savage swung his axe, easily shattering the puppet designed and crafted by the Mahas master. This involuntarily filled him with a sense of fear. He wasn't sure if he could withstand the blow. So, after entering the village, King dodged Loki a second time. This time, however, it completely unleashed Loki's primal fighting spirit. His axe missed, but he didn't hesitate to drop it. He threw the bloody axe without hesitation, continued running, and leaped. In mid-air, he opened his bloody mouth, revealing a mouthful of sturdy teeth, and bit into King's cheek. King was terrified. In shock and rage, he channeled his inner energies and attempted another sword attack, but just as he was about to form a seal, he stopped. In mid-air, Loki was like a tarantula, using his one remaining arm to tumble with King into the mud and blood. The downpour continued. He bit King's cheek with his teeth, tearing off a long strip of flesh from nose to ear. Then, something even more terrifying happened. Crunching, he began to chew King's flesh less than 10 centimeters away. King's teeth gnashed, his eyes clenched. He was shocked to find that after half a century of cultivation, he was completely helpless against this enemy that flew at his face and devoured him. Whether he controlled his flying sword or activated his indestructible five-colored sword energy, he would inevitably injure himself due to inertia. The Shushan sword cultivators were all fragile, their offensive power far exceeding their defense. If the sword energy pierced him, he would surely die. In desperation, King had to separate the nascent soul that had merged with him. Although this would weaken him further due to the loss of spiritual energy, doing nothing would undoubtedly be tantamount to waiting for death. After the nascent soul emerged from his body, he raised his left hand. With a low humming sound, a black sword flew from the sky into the nascent soul's palm. Just as the five-colored Yuanying raised its black sword, about to pierce Loki's back, a black spear suddenly pierced through the bloody mist surrounding him. Hanshu village's garrison captain, Katya, led the few remaining winged guards, charging through the bloody mist. Damn it! Forget about the others. Let's deal with this bastard eating my face first, King muttered through gritted teeth. Being limbless, he had no means of retaliation once Loki got close to him. Meanwhile, Loki, despite having lost his right arm, held King's head tightly with his left. After devouring the flesh and blood, he began gnawing at his eyeballs, nasal cavity, and even his skull. The grinding of his teeth on the hard bone made an eerie sound. The 98-year-old King's Henron finally couldn't bear the fear and began to howl loudly. But the howl lasted only 3 seconds before Loki bit off his tongue. Katya, the urgent reinforcements arriving from the blood mist, didn't understand how all this unfolded, but she knew the man sprawled on the ground was her village chief. Her mission now was to use all her strength to prevent the black dagger from piercing the village chief's back. In this critical moment, she unhesitatingly dropped her spear and grasped the black sword with her bare hands, confronting the ethereal nascent soul. As a spirit, the nascent soul's physical strength was extremely limited. Seeing Katya's firm grip on the blade, it immediately dropped the hilt and blew a massive ball of flame from its mouth, instantly transforming Katya into a fiery figure. Even as the flames consumed her, she drew upon the remaining strength in her bones to maintain a firm grip on the hilt, preventing the black sword from slipping from her fingers. On the ground, the battle between Loki and King Henren reached its final moments. Haha. So this is how this power is used. Ha ha ha. So fucking awesome. As his heart pounded, thick white steam began to erupt from Loki's body. He knew it wasn't the crimson apostle body bestowed upon him by the bloody creator that was now in effect, but rather the more ancient boiling bloodline within him, the bloodline passed down from Olaf the Bloody Conqueror, the founding Viking emperor. Flesh and bone shards continuously flowed from the corners of Loki's mouth. In his utter confusion, he began to gnaw at King's skinless skull. The hard skull rubbed against his teeth, and under the immense force, it scraped away like wood under a plane, leaving behind snow-white bone fragments. Having devoured all the flesh on his face, the maddened Loki actually began to gnaw at his bones. Loki, his arm broken, and King, with most of his face missing, rolled in the mud and blood, becoming two bloody figures. King was completely devastated. The sword cultivator's fighting style is to achieve victory from a distance of 100 meters. With a majestic presence, a feather fan and a robe. Even in death, he lies dignified, his attire flowing. King had witnessed all manner of death throughout his life of battle. But even in his wildest dreams, he could never have imagined that he would one day be tortured like this by his own kind. Pain, fear, and the deep fear of death drove him to a shrill howl. The cries grew louder, interrupting Loki's feeding until he finally discovered the source of the disturbing sound. Haha, that vibrating thing looks like a piece of fresh meat. His bloodshot eyes locked onto the slightly trembling Adam's apple, and Loki finally bared his white teeth, biting down firmly on King's throat. Save me, Manager High, save me. Brother, save me. Save me. King's face, torn like a rag, screamed helplessly, but his voice gradually faded. The rapid dissipation of his life force weakened his nascent soul. The flames emanating from his nascent soul grew fainter and fainter, eventually fading into a wisp of green smoke. When that smoke dissipated, the nascent soul, King, and Loki all melted into the sticky blood residue on the ground. Only Katya, her entire body ablaze with flame, remained gripping the black sword. An unyielding fire gleamed in the young woman's eyes. Even with her fingers broken and large areas of her skin burned, she never retreated. It was she who secured Loki a precious opportunity for a comeback. Chapter 188, the third entry. He opened his eyes again, and when the thick darkness dissipated, the familiar blood mist returned, like a lonely island in the boundless ocean. The hermit crab's massive shell was gone. So too had vanished the 6 fallen titans, standing majestically in the crimson mud. They had perished in the first wave of attacks unleashed by Master King after he revealed his true form. It was that same sort energy, like a gentle breeze, that shattered the 6 fallen titans in a single blow, severing his own right arm in the process. His right arm remained empty. A faint blood-color mist rose from the wound. In this space, he felt no pain. However, his lost arm hadn't grown back naturally. What had just happened? I seemed to remember throwing away the blood axe, then opening my maw and biting the head of the human stick. Now, re-entering this petri dish, could it be? As expected, after a dozen steps, he saw Master King hidden within the puppet. Gently stroking the puppet before him with his remaining left arm, Loki was astonished to discover that, from the touch to the texture and form of its skin, it was identical to a real human. Furthermore, after searching for a long time, he could find no seams that belonged to the machine. From the outside, the seamless design was indistinguishable from a living human. This kind of technology was unheard of in the 21st century before his time travel. Opposite King Henren stood another figure. It was none other than Gu Changking, the key refining master from the pre-Qin period who had long lived in this petri dish. His skin had turned a crimson red, bathed in a faint bloody glow. Having remained within the blood mist illusion for a long time in his spirit form, He constantly breathed in the mist imbued with the spiritual energy of the blood creator, and his transformation had almost been completed. It seems that for a mortal like me, the bloody creator's lineage can still perform manual transformation. However, for a key cultivator like Gu Changking, who has reached the Dalojingxan realm, they are unable to transform his soul and body, and can only allow the boundless blood mist to slowly erode him. The slender wrench rose again beneath his feet. Loki looked up at the sky speechlessly and shouted, "Brothers, don't you want to fight?" Through his battles with Leviathan and King Zhenren, he had come to understand the importance of the fallen titans. As mechanical cannon fodder that always faithfully followed orders, they were extremely useful in actual combat. Now, with all 6 fallen titans dead, King, whom he had defeated with all his might, was the only potential seed to become a fallen titan. Under such circumstances, the bloody creator actually wanted King and Gu Changking to compete in a duel. It was like an adult beating up a baby, with almost no suspense. After waiting for a long time, the 3 men above the blood mist showed no sign of stopping him. Instead, the wrench rose another 3 feet, almost reaching his face. In desperation, he moved the wrench. Thus began the battle between the Tang Dynasty sword cultivator and the Pre-Qin key cultivator. Meanwhile, in Hanshu village, Marindon, after a restful night in his comfortable guest room, awoke to find his shackles removed. The man who had removed them was a portly English monk. If I recall correctly, his name seemed to be Francis, but now, he was terrified beyond recognition. He crouched in a corner, clutching the holy cross tightly in his hands, his whole body shaking like a sieve. After repeatedly questioning Marindon, receiving no answer, he left the guest room, bewildered. The stench of blood washed over him. The castle corridors and banquet hall were littered with broken arms and the tragically dead bodies of English soldiers. Beyond the castle, the center of the village had become a bloody hell. All the flesh and blood had evaporated from the carcasses of the 2 enormous dragons. The 2 eerie, white bones stood silently in place, surrounded by layers of English soldiers. The bodies of the soldiers almost covered the square in front of the castle, and the blood flowing from them formed a river, dyeing the harbor near the village a brilliant red. Swarms of crows, vultures, and even wolves, smelling the scent of flesh and blood, flocked to the scene. It wasn't just the square of Coldwater Castle. When the massacre began, many English soldiers tried to escape to the Gathans, where the residents of Coldwater lived. However, these semi-underground dwellings, with doors only 1.2 meters high, were extremely difficult to breach. Countless soldiers, upon thrusting their heads inside, were immediately beheaded by the Viking hunters guarding the entrances. A mountain of corpses lay before the gates of almost every canton. The body of the scheming old Bernard lay piled in the center of the pile of English soldiers. Last night, as a bloody mist rose, he groped his way to a cavern in pitch-black darkness. He cried out his name and climbed inside, only to be beheaded by the Viking guarding the gate with an axe. He had calculated that the ordinary villagers of Hanshu village would let him in upon hearing his name. But he had never imagined that he would attempt to climb into Sanji's canton. As the only enemy of Duke Bernard in the village, he didn't think twice when he heard the voice and chopped off the old duke's head with an axe. Morandon covered her mouth tightly. She didn't understand how all this could have happened, but the village, almost soaked in blood, told her without a doubt that it was no illusion. Last winter, it was said that this man had defeated 500 Viking shield axemen with 30 Viking hunters and won. If that victory was won through sound tactics and united determination, this time, Loki, employing only the 300 women, children, and hunters of Coldwater Village, slew 1,500 fully armed English soldiers and 3 dragons. Such a feat was indistinguishable from magic. Of course, Coldwater Village had paid a heavy price for this victory. Entering the church, Morandon found that almost all the survivors of the village had gathered there. They stood silently behind several white-robed monks, praying for the dozen wounded lying in bed. Jerome, Lawrence, Katya, and Fafnir, the backbone of Coldwater Village, had fought bravely last night, and almost all of them had been seriously injured. The few remaining holy bishops, chosen ones of the Path of Holy Light, were doing their utmost to treat them. But the most important, the village chief, was still missing. Also absent from the scene was Loki's daughter, Sophie. However, Sophie was busy at the moment. Nefertiti was manipulating Sophie's body, intensively crafting the Anubis warrior. "Little sister, we've made a fortune tonight." The 1,000-year-old Ong's tone was filled with excitement. Inside Sophie's bedroom, 7 giant sword cultivators lay neatly on the floor. Nefertiti held the scepter of Anubis. The Anubis golem atop the scepter had opened its maw, pouring dark potion from its mouth into each bandaged sword cultivator. These demigod bodies, rich in psychic energy, are the perfect vessels for creating Anubis warriors. After all, these powerful beings, caught between life and death, can only use their flesh to resist the onslaught of the Styx. We need them to constantly be in a state between life and death. Only warriors with strong psychic energy can generate a sufficiently rich death aura. While this death aura will corrode their bodies, it is also the source of Anubis's undead magic. Hopefully, all 7 of them can successfully withstand the dark potion's erosion. 7 Anubis warriors. Roar, I was not as rich as I am today even when I was a pharaoh in my previous life. If we had these 7 treasures last night, how could we not beat the old guy who controlled the black sword? What a pity. That is a good seedling that may become a hidden servant, but, Daddy, what dad? Dad? The whole village is looking for your dad, one more or one less is not too few. Follow your sister to make Anubis warriors, that is the serious matter. We women living in this world are not vassals of men. Only by having a skill in this troubled world can we better protect our families and keep our own positions. Wait a few years, when your bastard brothers and sisters are born, you will naturally understand this truth. Chapter 189 The Seeds of Resistance. Hey, 3 brothers, are we done yet? Loki sat on the isolated island, his cheek resting on his hand. He watched a flying sword pierce through his ethereal body, his face impassive. Only a hint of deep sleepiness lingered. He had never imagined that this battle between sword cultivators would last so long. There was no precise time in the blood mist space, but a rough estimate was that at least 3 days had passed since he entered. In those 3 days, Gu Changking and Master King had exchanged no more than 10 moves. Each of their attacks was paused mid-air by the 3 giants. They would open the lid of the petri dish and use their giant fingers to pull the 2 sword cultivators out one by one, carefully studying them while whispering. Sometimes they would even take the dull black sword dancing in the sky, hammering and examining it. After 2 long days, Gu Changking, despite being without a sword, relied on his profound cultivation to successfully bring forth the true form of Master King. When the limbless, with only a withered head, Master King emerged from the puppet, Loki could hear a deep cheer from above. The deep cheer even jolted him out of his nap. Holy crap! You're a bunch of high-tech aliens so impressive. Haven't you seen anything like this? They opened the lid again and carefully pulled out the tiny Master King. The 3 blood-colored creators gathered together, assembling and disassembling his body, his nascent soul, and then the puppet. Like children taking a new piece of transformed steel, they studied it for a good while before returning it to its place. As the battle continued, Loki finally saw the fighting style of Master King's true self. In Hanshu village, the blood mist obscured most of his vision. During the battle, he could only sense a gust of wind. But now, widening his eyes, he finally saw that Master King's attacks weren't magic. Instead, once his nascent soul merged with his own, he could extend it from his body, transforming it into a long, flexible whip. This whip embodies all the wisdom King has amassed over half a lifetime of cultivation. The spiritual filaments used by sword cultivators to control their flying swords are typically invisible and intangible, like air. However, King has devised a unique technique, conjuring his nascent soul into a long whip. He then absorbs natural resources and transforms it into an indestructible laser sword. While zipping through the air at high speed, this intelligent whip automatically destroys all enemies in its path. Thanks to this technique, Loki felt only a gentle breeze, and within a second, 6 fallen titans and his right arm were completely detached. Even against Gu Changking, King's single move could still inflict devastating damage. Gu Changking's body was already covered in scars. Perhaps this is the evolution of combat techniques over the past millennium. In terms of cultivation level, Gu Changking and Feng Huzi are both Dalao Jinxin, great golden immortals, having survived the tribulation of thunder. They are full realm higher than King. Both their spiritual energy and physical strength far surpass his. However, King possessed a new combat technique honed through the continuous analysis and combat of countless sword cultivators over millennia. This was why Ling Huchang, completely depleted of his internal energy, could rely on the 9 swords of Dugu to contend with his sword sect disciples. Combat technique also plays a crucial role in combat. While Gu Changking's disadvantage might be attributed to the loss of his signature demon sealing blade, it was undeniable that Master King, a nascent soul cultivator, was truly exceptionally powerful. The three blood creators spent time observing him, studying his anatomy and the methods of exerting force. They seemed deeply curious about the five-color nascent soul within him and its various transformations. The shadow giant, constantly shrouded in black mist, was particularly curious about the nascent soul's various transformations. They used various methods to stimulate the five-color nascent soul to produce various reactions. However, for Loki, existing in an ethereal state on the red earth, this period became a long, torturous ordeal. Everyone, I can't stop you from conducting scientific research here, but could you three please let me go first? I have a lot of things to do in my village. Even if you won't let me go, how about we talk about reattaching my severed arm first? I risked my life to get you such a fun toy, so giving you two a reward to help me upgrade this body isn't asking too much, is it? He shouted at the air above him for a long time. The three giant heads only exchanged eerie whispers, not even glancing at Loki. To be honest, he didn't like this feeling. It was a feeling of powerlessness in his previous life. He grew up in the prosperous Red Kingdom. In this country, those who worked hard and surpassed their lazy peers were guaranteed a path to advancement. Those with education, who studied hard and achieved good grades, naturally rose to prominence. Even those without education, with hard work and dedication, constantly improving their skills, could seize the opportunity to change jobs and achieve a higher position than their peers. In other words, success in this country is guaranteed with 70% effort, 20% thinking, and 10% luck. After traveling through time and entering the magical Middle Ages, Loki discovered that the fate of most people still rested in their own hands. Viking warriors needed only to fight tooth and nail, outmatching 100 enemies on the battlefield. Odin would witness this and grant him divine power. Monks of the Holy Bishop needed only to earnestly preach the gospel and do their utmost to plant the Holy Cross of Christ in all unfamiliar lands. Their sequence path would advance. Those like Lawrence, who risked their lives by inserting the cross into the Leviathan, could reap immense benefits for both themselves and the church. However, Loki's fate was not in his own hands. His sequence path could not advance on its own. Each upgrade required the modification and upgrade of the Sandming Blood Creator. The timing and method of the modifications were entirely up to the Blood Creator's whim. As the main lord, he had no decision-making, discussion, or even consultation rights. This situation, he felt, was far too passive. Although a solution hasn't been found yet, this backward situation must be reversed one day. Sitting cross-legged in the red soil, Loki gazed at the three giant heads in the sky with sharp eyes, pondering silently. Humans are like ants in the eyes of the outer gods. The bloody creator's sole interest in us hairless monkeys is research. In their eyes, Loki is like a seabird with a GPS strapped to its body, serving a mere observational purpose. Scientists certainly don't want the seabird they've selected to die, but they don't mind improving its life, as long as their research isn't complete, as long as I'm still able to continue feeding fresh experimental subjects into this petri dish. I won't be abandoned for now, but this feeling of being treated like a lackey is truly unpleasant. The current intelligence available is that Gu Changqing, Shen Gong, and Zhuan Hezi once killed one of these creatures in the sunken city. This leads to the conclusion that the bloody creator is not invincible to humans. If I can use a similar method to kill a few more strong men of the same level as King Zhenren, or even kill a few stronger demigods, and send them into the petri dish, as long as I unite with them and find a way to break the confinement of the petri dish and kill the three Ming outer gods, it seems that it is not completely impossible for me to completely control this world. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190: The First Meeting with the Pharaoh. 10 days passed before Loki reappeared. During these 10 days, the fate of nearly all of Hanshu village's senior officials remained unknown. With nearly all of them injured and disabled, Jim Hank, the chosen one under the Holy Bishop's warpath, assumed command and dispatch. He had no other options. Hanshu village was truly destitute. He immediately sent for help to contact Fogduck, nestled in the mountains. After Wenzoff personally led Slavic lumberjacks to reinforce the village, the villagers began burning the bodies in an orderly manner. They patrolled the village day and night, and dispatched multiple search and rescue teams beyond the village into the surrounding jungles and mountains, searching for Loki. Imagine the consternation of Fogduck's search party when they discovered the bodies of 500 Viking shield axemen in the woods outside the village. Wenzoff and Jim Hank stared in amazement, completely bewildered by what they had just witnessed. In this battle, Duke Bernard's personal guards and all the elite soldiers of Storm's End perished. Combined with the death of Duke Bernard himself, all the key members of Storm's End had perished in this battle. 3 days later, a hunter patrolling the Sworded Gorge spotted a figure sleeping soundly in a large tree. Climbing down to the valley floor, he discovered it was none other than village chief Loki, who had been missing for nearly 2 weeks. Carrying him back to the village, the villagers were astonished to find him intact, with no visible injuries. He was still breathing, but his consciousness hadn't yet returned. A large group huddled in the room, unable to devise a solution. That night, after everyone had left, Sophie lay by his side, occasionally calling out his name from a half-asleep state. Not long after, Loki regained consciousness. Darkness filled his vision, and his skin could only feel the soft fur of the bearskin and the cool breeze blowing in from the window. He tried to open his eyes, but his stiff body was clearly still recovering. At this point, he couldn't control the situation properly. Fortunately, his brain was functioning, and he struggled to recall what had happened inside the petri dish. However, after exhausting his efforts to retrieve his lost memories, he was surprised to discover that the only remaining memory was the image of the 3 giants studying the spirit of King Zhenrun. He couldn't recall the outcome of King Zhenrun's final battle with Gu Changking, his subsequent upgrades, or the lack of fallen titans in the petri dish, none of these crucial matters. Fortunately, his lost right arm had grown back. This was good news. "Big sister, will my father wake up again?" Sophie muttered unconsciously, lying on Loki's chest. Loki was surprised that his daughter could speak, but who had taught her this language? So I'm Viking? "Little sister, his breathing is steady. His psychic energy is flowing in perfect rhythm with his breathing, but, Nefertiti reached out and pried open Loki's eyelids. Silently chanting an incantation, her right palm shone a gentle beam of sunlight. His eyeball, stimulated by the beam, showed no sign of movement. This undoubtedly alarmed her. Only a soulless zombie could lose its ability to respond to the nourishing sunlight. Could it be that his soul is no longer in this body? Even more alarmed was Loki, whose mind had regained consciousness. Within seconds, he heard Sophie speak fluently in a strange language he couldn't understand. At the same time, his eyelids fluttered open, and he saw his daughter's expression transform into the complex expression of an adult. Such an expression should never have appeared on the face of a 5-year-old girl. Loki tried to open his eyes again, feeling this body gradually awakening. Hanshu village was usually full of chores, and he had to admit that Sophie's supervision was lacking, but he had never imagined that his eldest daughter would be possessed by someone else. Even more outrageous, she was actually getting along quite well with the old demon who had taken over her body. Any father wouldn't be pleased by this sight. After a desperate struggle, he finally managed to sit up in bed. He reached out and grasped his eldest daughter's soft shoulders, gazing into her pure eyes. He could clearly sense a dangerous, aged spirit within his daughter's body, staring back at him. "Who are you? Why are you in my daughter's body?" His hands gradually grew stronger, then immediately softened, for he knew that somewhere, his timid eldest daughter was still hiding. "I am Nefertiti, ruler of the Nile, high priestess of Horus, calendar reformer, visionary, and pharaoh worshipped by all the gods." Loki didn't understand the long words, but he knew that this being residing within his daughter's body must be a formidable threat. He extended his large hand, and just as he was about to touch her tender cheek, the girl's expression suddenly changed. "Daddy, don't hurt this big sister. Nefertiti is a good person. Over the past few days, she has taught me how to speak, fight, and many ways to defend myself. She protects me every day." "Haha. This old fellow can still protect you?" "I don't believe it." Without hesitation, he grabbed his daughter's head. His pale hand barely touched the strange spirit before he could even exert force. A crimson sun rose before Loki's eyes, accompanied by a dazzling radiance. This crimson sun dispelled all darkness. As the golden sunlight poured down, a magnificent painting slowly unfolded before Loki's eyes. It was a steppe palace. Blazing, rich gold was the only color he could see. Flanking this magnificent staircase sat gods of all shapes and sizes. There were monsters with human heads and snake tails, burly giants over 10 meters tall, strange-looking, yet inexplicably dangerous beasts, as well as gods with human heads and snake bodies, human hands and lion bodies, human beast bodies and bird bodies, and many other bizarre deities. They sat or stood, all leaning against the golden steps, clad in golden robes richly reminiscent of Egypt, their exposed skin dusted with a gold dust customary to Egyptian royalty. At the summit of this golden staircase sat a wheat-colored woman, shimmering in gold, save for a few strands of golden thread. She wore a tall golden crown and held a sun scepter. Behind her, the patron gods of ancient Egypt, Horus and the hidden Ammon, flanked her. They were not statues, but living beings. Chapter 191 Sun Illusion. Loki looked down at himself. He was now dressed in a red robe, with 3 golden arms on his arms. This attire clearly didn't belong to this era. He looked up at Nefertiti at the top of the stairs. Just as he was about to speak, a black cat at her side suddenly flew over and landed on his shoulder. My cat is very fond of you. This at least proves you are not an enemy of the throne. Crimson Apostle of the Red Moon, this is your seat. You may sit down and speak with me. The female pharaoh on the throne rose with graceful steps. Although her features were too far away to be seen, her figure was still slender and graceful. Even a slight turn in her movements exuded a powerful, alluring charm. As she spoke, a man from the East Land, dressed in white brocade, on the 7th step below the throne, translated for her. He spoke in fluent Chinese. His brocade robe was emblazoned with a 3-legged golden crow, and he held a bronze scepter. Before speaking, he also turned toward the female pharaoh and bowed. If nothing unexpected happened, this was probably a Chinese diplomat. Loki blinked softly. He had long recognized the words golden splendor, but the scene before him was the first time he had seen them so perfectly captured. Everywhere he looked, there was only dazzling gold, a variety of rare beasts, and ancient gods. And the female pharaoh, standing tall at the pinnacle of all the gods, truly possessed unparalleled majesty. Loki ascended the steps, step by step. He stepped in the golden staircase, followed by 4 monks with black lacquer on their faces and golden tattoos on their arms. After ascending more than 20 steps, he was only 3 steps away from the female pharaoh. From this distance, he could clearly see her tanned figure and the exquisite accessories adorning her body. But the first thing he saw was the mask of Horus resting in her delicate hands. So, you're from here, standing proudly on the 3rd step, his gaze level with the female pharaoh's feet, adorned with only a few strands of gold thread. This didn't feel like speaking on equal terms. However, when he tried to take another step, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move his legs. Crimson Apostle, your bodies and crafts may be advanced, but your exploration of the mind is as blank as a blank slate. After more than 1400 years, you haven't learned how to preserve your soul. Because of this, you are relegated to the 3rd step below the pharaoh. Go and sit with your kind. A round, slender arm extended and pointed. Loki looked behind him and saw several blood-red creators. They were no longer hundreds of meters tall, but the size of ordinary humans. Looking at the female pharaoh again, all the contempt in his eyes had disappeared. In his previous life, countless film and television works spared no effort to portray the openness and luxury of the prosperous Tang dynasty. In Chang'an City, people of all races roamed endlessly. They wore strange clothes and spoke different languages. They attended schools run by the Tang people and could even obtain positions in the imperial court through the imperial examinations. But this was only when facing humans. Loki had never imagined that, thousands of years ago, in the ancient Egyptian dynasty, the pharaoh could actually recruit various foreign gods under his command. Seeing their respectful and humble demeanor, it was clear that they accepted their place in society. He looked toward the 2nd step and saw several familiar faces, the lizardmen from Leviathan's back. They were standing beside the female pharaoh. By this time, their lizard-like appearance had almost completely faded, leaving only 2 golden vertical pupils. Mr. Loki, as you are now, you are within my sun vision. According to the scientific terms that your bloody creator can understand, everything the human eye sees is the light of the sun. As a sun priestess of the Temple of Horus, I possess the ability to manipulate sunlight, creating images before your eyes. Of course, the Egyptian pharaohs are immortal. When we slumber, we merely await the next opportunity to awaken. Over the centuries, I have gained knowledge of nearly everything in the kingdom. My subjects call me Nefertiti the Visionary. Perhaps I am the only one in this nation with a sense of crisis. It was this caution that led me to place the soul stone within the mask of Horus, and ultimately to your discovery. Slowly approaching Loki, he could now see the full face of the pharaoh. Loki fell into a long silence. This was a woman of extreme beauty. In a previous life, a single ancient statue of hers had been the subject of a fierce, open and covert struggle between Germany, the United States, and Egypt for nearly a century. She is the only woman to grace the cover of Time magazine as a statue. She is also the world's oldest woman to have graced the cover. She is a woman shrouded in mystery, almost like a shroud of mist, in historical legends. Legend has it that she was the most beautiful woman in ancient Egyptian history. The walls of Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings clearly state, before the birth of the mother of the pharaoh, no woman so beautiful had ever appeared in Egypt. Nefertiti's name means the beauty that comes on the way. However, her inclusion in nearly every pharaoh's tomb and in ancient texts wasn't solely due to her beauty. She was also a remarkable ruler. The Book of the Sun calls her Egypt's most powerful female pharaoh, while Egypt's nobles viewed her as a religious fanatic, a conspirator, and a traitor. The people generally hailed her as a hero. Throughout her reign, she always remembered the tragic lesson of her father, Amenhotep III, who was crushed to the ground by the prophet Moses and the Holy Lord Jehovah, and vigorously eradicated the worship of lower-level foreign gods within the ancient Egyptian city-states. At the same time, she vigorously promoted the two truly powerful ancient gods, Horus and hidden Ammon, as the patron deities of ancient Egypt. With their help, she created a series of original ancient Egyptian deities, including the Sphinx and Anubis. These deities, regarding the country as their birthplace, refrained from corrupting humanity or harming their fellow humans, selflessly bestowing the power upon the faithful in their temples. Under the rule of this dictatorial warlord, ancient Egypt expanded its territory and reached prosperity. However, her actions did not serve the interests of the royal aristocracy. When slaves were given excessive power, their growing confidence made them increasingly difficult to control. Furthermore, Nefertiti constantly invited numerous foreign gods roaming the western continent to the pharaoh's golden palace. She studied their techniques, history, and origins, and through negotiation, she tried to prevent the kingdom from entering into war with the gods. In ancient Egypt, ascending to the throne of Pharaoh was practically tantamount to immortality. The invasion of the Holy Lord Jehovah had just opened a door called how to usurp the throne for countless princes and nobles, but this door was immediately slammed shut by Nefertiti. Chapter 192 Sun Illusion, 2. According to historical records, Nefertiti lived only to the age of 30. After that, there was no further news of her. No documentation provides definitive answers to these questions: how she fell from power, whether she escaped unscathed, and where she lived after her abdication. King Tutankhamun, the pharaoh she personally raised, seems to have deliberately erased all records of Nefertiti. During his reign, no record of her remains. Her mummy, tomb, or relics remain. The only definitive evidence of her existence is a statue dating back to around 1300 BC. The most famous female pharaoh in ancient Egyptian history vanished silently into the depths of history. Yet, here she stood before Loki, a vibrant figure, still looking her 30, a woman's full maturity. Her skin was firm and smooth, her face smooth and wrinkle-free. Her tanned complexion, combined with her golden garb, gave her an air of health and nobility. Her chest stood out, resembling a young girl's. Time seemed frozen in time. Mr. Loki, I understand your anger as a father. My temporary inhabitation of your daughter's body in spirit form is a helpless act. And please believe that my presence will only benefit this poor soul box. Oh? You didn't know your daughter was a soul box, did you? Haha, this matter can't be explained in a few words. Because this matter involves the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. As she spoke, she secretly glanced at the lizardman not far away, a hint of resentment in the corner of her eyes. You also recognize these lizardmen of the Illuminati? Loki asked in surprise. He hadn't yet told the 1,000-year-old wretch that the golden mask she inhabited was the one he had found in the obsidian pyramid on Leviathan's back at the lizardman's headquarters. Of course I recognize them, Nefertiti said in a rather bleak tone. Back then, these short fellows were the weakest gods in my territory. During the purge of the outer gods, they voluntarily entered the palace as advisors. I granted them many rights, allowing them to gradually evolve. But I never expected that these very weak gods would sow the seeds of the kingdom's downfall. For Loki, this outcome was easy to predict. After all, the Horus mask that Nefertiti inhabited had been taken as trophies by the lizardmen, and they certainly had no intention of allowing her to resurface. If it weren't for the accidental removal of the golden mask by Oldgor, a Viking pirate with only gold in his eyes, she would never have seen the light of day again. I don't mean to destroy Sophie's soul. On the contrary, she's a soul box crafted by the lizardmen of the Illuminati. I may be the only one in the world who possesses the power to free her, because this secret art of connecting the souls of the yin and yang realms was bestowed upon the Illuminati by my Styx priests. As the sunlight faded, Loki emerged from the illusion, having returned to his own body. Standing up, he gently touched Sophie's delicate face and asked earnestly, "Do you really like this, sister?" Sophie nodded gently. "Big sister taught me how to speak. Sophie loves talking to daddy. Big sister also taught me many ways to kill bad guys. Although Sophie doesn't particularly enjoy killing, Big sister said she often has to do it to protect those who love me from being killed." Loki pinched his eldest daughter's face with pity, a trace of deep worry still etched in his brow. This 1,000-year-old Ongzi said so. But any civilized person who grew up in a civilized society knows that even with family members, a person's words are only half believable. Because everything in the world is always full of uncertainty. Even if the truth is as the old man said, she needs to find her own mummy. But what if her mummy has been damaged over the millennia? What if it's lost? If she can't be found at all, what will her expression be? Will she cling to Sophie's body and refuse to come out? These are all serious concerns he needs to consider. A 5-year-old's mind is not so impure. To convince Loki not to expel Nefertiti, Sophie showed him the results of her learning over the past few days. When Loki saw the long line of gleaming Anubis warriors, he was completely stunned. He had thought that the Anubis scepter and the golden scorpion armlet, placed alongside the mask of Horus, would be of great value. But he never imagined that in the hands of ancient Egyptian royalty, these items could be used in such a way. Especially when he heard that Nefertiti had, without his knowledge, killed a storm lord and 9 giant and stage sword cultivators. He smiled wryly and shook his head, finally understanding why the Izumo merchants had sent such a formidable force as King's Henrin to Hanshu village. A butterfly fluttering its wings on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean triggers a devastating storm on the other side. The loot retrieved from the obsidian pyramid has already triggered so many chain reactions. Who knows how much more suffering it will bring to Hanshu village in the future. With a deep sigh, Loki set about addressing another sudden problem. This problem was called Marindin. As a Viking princess, why aren't you staying home embroidering instead of heading off with a shipload of warriors? Could you be a chosen one from some other sequence path? Loki sat across from the princess, maintaining a distance of about 3 meters. The princess, now meticulously washed and dressed, no longer looked the same as when she had disembarked. She wore a fiery red fox fur, revealing a patch of white skin across her flat belly and 2 long, slender legs as white as jade. The fire from the fireplace warmed her skin, making it feel warm and inviting. "I've been in the castle for so long, why haven't I seen your lady Una?" Morindin didn't answer Loki's question, but instead shifted his posture slightly. She had spent the vast majority of her life in Constantinople, so he knew how to capitalize on every opportunity. The relationship broke down, and she left on her own, Loki said calmly. In Scandinavia, where marriage was considered a weak concept, such cases were not uncommon. Honestly, the woman before him was indeed a feast for the eyes. Loki knew that after the invasion of Bakambush, much of her fortune had been destroyed, and all the nobles of the western continent, whom she had painstakingly attracted investment, had perished. The future was uncertain, and her fate uncertain. This was perhaps the princess's most vulnerable moment. If she had wanted to, she could have done anything for her. However, Loki had no interest at the moment. Hanshu village had been a shambles after the battle. As a lord, he had more important things to attend to. The first was to rush to the church to check on the wounded. Chapter 193. The camp is full of wounded soldiers. Loki decisively declined the princess's request to stay with me, resolutely choosing to fulfill his duty as a lord. He took Sophie's hand and walked into the holy cathedral. Upon entering, he was met with a startling sight. He had never expected that with Jerome and Lawrence lying dead and over 200 wounded men piling up in the village, it would be his old acquaintance, Father Francis, who would take on the responsibility of treating them. "My merciful and holy Lord, please grant me divine light and heal the warriors' wounds with your gentle hands." The wretched old man, clad in pure white monk's robes, stood on a high platform, hands raised high, chanting a prayer. Pure, white holy light flowed from the cross into his hands, forming a cascade that streamed into the cathedral. At first glance, he possessed a certain sanctity befitting a clergyman. Upon seeing Loki enter, Archbishop Francis hurriedly climbed down from the platform and scrambled to his side, his eyes filled with flattery. "My lord, during your coma, I toiled day and night, striving with all my might to ensure that no more casualties were suffered by Hanshu village. We may have had many misunderstandings before, but please, for my prompt correction and surrender, spare my life. Of course, if you would, in recognition of my hard work, gift me a ship next spring, that would be even better." Looking at the trembling old archbishop before him, Loki gained a deeper understanding of the saying, 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west. In a sense, this old man truly was his lucky star. Nodding, Loki instructed his subordinates to treat the surrendered man well, especially not forgetting to assign him a widowed Slavic girl that evening. Loki knew exactly what this man was like. He could still vividly remember the eye-catching women's lingerie he had found in his room after answering the old monk. Loki quickly approached Jerome and Lawrence, who were still swathed in bandages. He had witnessed the two men plummet from mid-air during the bloody night, and his instincts told him they were doomed. But now, seeing them still alive, he couldn't help but regain some faith in the holy bishop. Honestly, the holy bishop church didn't hold a high position in Loki's heart. After his battle with Master King, he saw clearly, the combat capabilities of one chosen one differed greatly from another. Take, for example, the two monks of the holy bishop. Against mortals, Jerome and Lawrence, having reached sequence 3, were formidable. Together, they could unleash dazzling spells and reap the lives of mortals in droves. However, when faced with a tough opponent, such as a nascent soul stage veteran like King Hunran, Loki was confronted with a harsh reality. The chosen ones of the holy bishop path were no pushovers. In battle, before unleashing their divine power, they had to recite a rather lengthy incantation, much like summoning a deity. During this time, their spellcasting could not be interrupted. After the lengthy incantation, the attacker only gained increased offensive power, while the defender only gained increased defensive power. Against King, the two of them combined couldn't withstand a single blow. After one blow, both were reduced to their current state. The new god, Holy Lord Christ, was not on the same level as Holy Lord Jehovah, the ancient god who founded Judaism and the ancestor of the holy bishop. Holy Lord Christ was merely an auxiliary deity, capable of assisting overlords in city management. The chosen ones of various paths might be able to play a cameo role like police, handling minor conflicts among humans. But if they truly wanted to go toe-to-toe with an ancient god, an outer god, or a powerful key cultivator, they simply couldn't. All for nothing. Even more worrying for Loki was Katya, whose skin had been burned across large areas. Women all cherish beauty, especially a Slavic girl with skin as white as jade. She was only 19, newly married, and her biggest daily worry was how to give birth to a child for the 30-something Jerome. In the Middle Ages, neither the Vikings nor the holy monks had any effective methods for treating burns. From the accounts of those around him, Loki learned that it was this 19-year-old girl who had sacrificed her life to secure the opportunity to kill Master King. Now, relying on the bloody creator to survive, the girl before him had become this. Her body, once as swift as a flying monkey through the mountains and forests, was now unable to even stand after being assaulted by the flames spewed by Master King's nascent soul. Furthermore, her skin, once as white as jade, had taken on a dark, blood-red hue. Blood blisters covered her skin, and her entire chest, like a melted candle, was a horrible sight in its charred state. "Village chief, please allow me to kill myself. I cannot continue living like this. I will not allow the rest of my life to be presented to my husband like this." Hearing these words, Jerome, lying beside her, burst into tears. He was wrapped in bandages, unable to move, unable even to hug his wife. But he could still speak. "I will never allow you to die like this. If you die, I will not live alone." Loki shook his head helplessly. But just then, Sophie tugged at his hand. "My elder sister said that if you allow her to work with me for a while, she can use the surgery of the Temple of Anubis to help restore Sister Katya's appearance." "Really? Yes, but she might need some fresh human skin. Hell, let alone human skin, I could get her even the stars in the sky." Loki's eyes darted. It now appears that the 1,000-year-old bastard is quite capable. According to her, her mummy has been hidden in a secret location by servants of the Temple of Horus. What she truly needs is the body. Only with her soul in her body can she unleash her full power. Since plundering Sophie's body wasn't her original intention, having a free teacher, a free bodyguard, and perhaps a free surgeon isn't such a bad thing. Following her is like learning from her, hands-on. Even if she learns even 10% of this old bastard's skills, she'll be more than enough to navigate this cruel and chaotic world. Even if she can't be defeated or driven away, there seems to be no better solution for this 1,000-year-old bastard than to keep her here for the time being. My top priority now is to rescue Katya. As a subordinate, this Slavic girl is incredibly useful. If she dies like this, I'm afraid I'll regret it for the rest of my life. At worst, I could make a special trip to the Nile and help her find the mummy hidden in Thebes. Chapter 194 Angry Quackenbush. The Slavic king, Quackenbush, had been having a rough time recently. His bad luck wasn't due to the strength of his opponents or the bloodshed of his battles. Rather, since landing on the eastern shores of the Baltic Sea, he'd been surprised to find himself with seemingly few battles to fight in the past 14 days. This had left him with a profound sense of unreality. Just a month earlier, 10,000 Vikings had landed here, embarking on an autumn raid on Slavic lands. When Oleg returned with his army, he expected a death charge from the starving Vikings. However, since landing, from Herul to Kiev, from Warsaw to Murmansk, all he saw were deserted villages, burned fields, and Slavs hanging themselves. He encountered very few Vikings. After a 14-day circuit of his cavalry from south to north, he had found and killed fewer than 1,000 Vikings. A huge question loomed in his mind: where had the remaining 9,000 or so gone? No one was found alive, no body was found dead. Could they have committed suicide en masse by jumping into the sea? Not only him, but even Oleg, who had meticulously planned the entire operation, found it hard to believe what he saw. The charred remains of Viking longships still lay on the beach on the eastern shore of the Baltic Sea. All the trees within 100 kilometers of the beach had been burned by the dragon. Even if these Vikings wanted to build ships, they had no materials. Where could they go? Oleg had been a Viking slave for nearly 20 years. He knew their resilience. These powerful warriors could not possibly have perished in the beast tide like the common people. Even if they encountered the ancient creatures and gods roaming the surface, such a large number of pirates would be enough to fight them. If starvation was the main cause, if 10,000 Vikings were starved to death in just 14 days, with only 1,000 remaining, there should be a large number of bodies on the surface. Could they have taken refuge in caves? Even if they had gone as deep underground as Quackenbush, they would still need people to bring them food. After returning to Murmansk for a brief rest, Oleg felt a constant sense of crisis. He reviewed his entire plan over and over, finding no loopholes. In the dead of night, he would even pull out the victory report that had been sent to him by pigeon from Tasli 10 days earlier. The English Navy had defeated the O'Sullivan family's reinforcements in the North Sea. As he had expected, he was resting in Hanshu village. Could it be that his worries stemmed from the river valley? Oleg knew that war was inevitable in Hanshu village, but in this battle between Duke Bernard and the English Navy, no matter who won, he would not lose. All of Quackenbush's soldiers could see that they were only one step away from complete victory. Almost everyone firmly believed that the Vikings who landed must have been killed by a flying dragon. Only Oleg stared at the map every day, almost losing his appetite. My teacher, I think we must accept a harsh truth. We've been deceived by that damned liar from the Holy Mountain. Returning to Murmansk, Quackenbush sat on the throne and spoke seriously to Oleg. It was already late autumn, and heavy snow had fallen from Murmansk's gloomy sky, but Oleg still felt a surge of heat. This heat was anger. All those who dared to deceive me are now buried in Murmansk's permafrost. What's that old fellow called? Nibiru. Haha, wait for that old fellow. By this point, this invasion, which Quackenbush considered a cowardly act, had ignited a rage within him. He was not a strategic strategist like Oleg, and frankly, he was not a qualified leader. But no one could deny that White Bear Quackenbush was a formidable warrior. In Quackenbush's eyes, none of his great achievements, burning Viking cities, slaughtering their children, and looting their gold and silver, brought him any satisfaction. His only joy in life was to confront a powerful enemy face to face and then defeat them. The annual Viking raids of previous years had been a long-awaited event. He could traverse the magnificent Slavic lands unarmed, fighting Vikings many times his size, savoring the thrill of battle and the icy pain of falling ice and snow on his wounds. He loved these Vikings because they always shouted Odin's name and fought him to the death. They never fled. However, this year, those who fell at his hands were unarmed, the elderly, the weak, women, and children. Even the few warriors he encountered were appallingly weak. He had expected to encounter 10,000 bloodthirsty and desperate Vikings upon his return to Slavia. Instead, after a long journey, he encountered only a few scattered waves of enemies. One can imagine Backhambush, like a starving ghost, eagerly awaiting a hearty meal, only to find a few grains. His rage escalated, now almost uncontrollable. Respected teacher, frankly, I don't care about the outcome of this war. The Vikings invade every year, but so what? Hasn't my people survived this way for so many years? Even if we truly eradicate them, what will happen? Within 100 years, the Slavic colonists of Scandinavia will be leading warlords eastward to plunder. They might even be even more brutal, because they'll think our lands belong to them, too. Oleg tried to say something, but Backhambush sternly gestured to silence him. From now on, I say this, and you listen, because I am still the king of the Slavs. After all, autumn is almost over. Let this year's battle end this way, Backhambush said, pointing a furry finger at a red circle in the center of the Shyandrin Mountains. Our ultimate goal is here. He pointed to the Viking sanctuary of Valhalla nestled in the mountains. I'm going to hunt down this charlatan called Nibru and crush his head. Oleg understood his king's temper, but as his chief advisor, he spoke frankly about his concerns. My king, I'm worried that if these Vikings, once bound to the Slavic region, return to Scandinavia by some means we can't comprehend, we, a few thousand men, will have to face so many Vikings. My dear teacher, is this even a big deal? Backhambush interrupted before Oleg could finish. Anger had extinguished his remaining patience. Outnumbered against outnumbered, is that so much fun? Since when have you become so weak? Even if we're surrounded by Vikings again after landing, so what? Haven't we experienced tougher battles than this? A person's life only lasts a few dozen autumns. This year, we're using 100 soldiers as our capital. If we can set foot on the Vikings' sacred mountain, I can personally enter their Valhalla and meet their gods. Haha, what could be more exciting than that? Oleg shook his head slightly. Without a doubt, Backhambush was the idiot often mentioned in history books. On the battlefield, the smart fear the stupid fear the stupid, and the stupid fear the reckless. Therefore, someone like Backhambush, who is both stupid and reckless, is often very difficult to deal with. No strategist can predict his movements, because where he's going, not even he knows. Today, he'd just impulsively decided to lead his army toward Valhalla for a death charge. Who knows, tomorrow, once he'd reached shore, he might change course and attack Conqueror's Bastion to kill Sullivan. He was a man who led battles based entirely on instincts and emotion. Perhaps, in the latter half of this war, he would hold the key to victory. Chapter 195, Chasing the Tiger and Devouring the Wolf. 7 days later, Backhambush's army re-embarked on their longships. They returned to Scandinavia and landed directly in the river valley. 3 days later, as the Slavic army marched into Storm's End, Oleg was astonished to find Loki, a young man barely 20, now the Duke of Storm's End. When he heard Backhambush propose the attack on Valhalla, he immediately gave the Slavic king a thumbs up. My king, excellent, such a brilliant idea, only my respected Slavic king could have come up with it. You truly are my ideal ruler. To be honest, I've seen your imposing presence since back in Frostwater Village. I never imagined you could truly be the legendary Slavic king. Haha. You truly are the savior Princess Hacker sent me. After Duke Bernard's death, Loki naturally assumed the dukedom of the river valley. Honestly, upon seeing Oleg and Backhambush, his shock was beyond words. No one could have guessed that the root of this disaster stemmed from his Hanshu village slave, Oleg. Even less could he have imagined that the Slavic warrior he saw in the village was none other than the real white bear Backhambush. As a king, he could enter Hanshu village so calmly and confidently, without even a hint of panic. This man possessed such courage. Haha, I've long disliked those blood-drinking vampires. Look at my village. It's precisely because I don't have a favorable impression of Valhalla that I chose to build both the Holy Church and the Hacker Temple in my village. Your advisor, Oleg, once served as the bishop of the Hacker Temple in my village. He knows the rules of my village all too well. He can attest to the truth of everything I say. Loki tensed every muscle on his face, straining to maintain the professional smirk he'd cultivated in his previous life. What many see as a disaster will be a rare opportunity for a few. Thanks to this joint Slavic and English invasion, Loki capitalized on timing and a fortunate opportunity to not only overthrow Duke Bernard, who had long been his enemy, but also, in the midst of the chaos, dispatched the Tang swordsman who had been pursuing him. And now, As Bakenbush was about to take a stroll through Valhalla, his eyes widened again. He discreetly glanced at Satyr, who was not far behind him, and gently gestured pause. According to their original plan, Satyr had already made a long circuit of the Slavic lands, using the bloodstone statue to gather all the starving Vikings into the sunken city. Tonight, when the Slavs were well fed and drowsy, they would activate the bloodstone statue and release all 9,000 Viking warriors. Regaining their strength in the sunken city, the Vikings, eager to avenge their lost families, would, like a swarm of iron locusts, instantly shred these rebellious slaves into pieces. But now, when he heard that Bakenbush intended to lead his army toward the halls of valor nestled deep in the mountains, the excitement that flickered in Loki's eyes wasn't pretense. He had long coveted the halls of valor nestled in the mountains in Loki's mind: swordsmen, holy mountains, halls of valor, and even Viking kings. All of these things were nothing. He wouldn't mind swinging his axe and chopping them all down, so long as he could reap the rewards. In Scandinavia, the halls of valor reigned supreme over all lords precisely because they tightly controlled the formulas for the potions, each of which had 8 upgrade sequences. Any Viking who wished to consume a potion had to pay a hefty price to purchase it from the storm acolytes. It was a monopoly. And the monopoly on a necessity happened to be a Viking necessity. Monopolizing a necessity was like the strict control of salt taxes and housing prices throughout the dynasties. Real estate is a minor issue. Even salt, a cheap necessity for fire, could still generate enormous wealth if it were monopolized by the state. If you were to follow these Slavic rebels and sneak into Valhalla during the war, he could steal some potion recipes. That would be a truly beautiful scene. Secondly, don't forget the Satyr's mentor, the Stormbringer Irithyll, who has been made into a dumpling by Nefertiti and is currently lying in the room next to the living room. During the Slavic invasion, Valhalla couldn't spare the manpower to thoroughly investigate Master Irithyll's whereabouts. But if you look closely, this matter is impossible to cover up. Loki clearly remembered that one of his disciples, Ymir, had entered Coldwater Village and attempted to locate him. Once this Slavic catastrophe is over, the Stormbringers in Valhalla will certainly not let Coldwater Village go easily. He feared that if they discovered the truth behind Master Irithyll's death, he had no way of predicting what these senior shamans would do to Storm's End. Adhering to the principle of striking first, he would also force Bakenbush to uproot Valhalla and put an end to this troublesome situation. Finally, the Viking sacred mountain had always been a mysterious place shrouded in gloom. According to the description given by the Satyr after his return from training, most areas of the sacred mountain were off limits to the trialists. Once they entered the sacred mountain and exchanged silver for potions, they would be chosen by several storm heralds to enter their training grounds. Entering the training grounds was like entering a prison. Anyone found venturing outside would even be personally hunted down by a storm herald. This statement alerted Loki. While ordinary people might view this as a typical Viking village raid, like catching a thief, the truth was, as far as Valhalla was concerned, they cared nothing for a few hundred gold coins. With a formula in hand, they could generate endless amounts of wealth, perhaps even more than they could spend in several lifetimes. If even the cultivators attempting to descend the mountain were hunted by Stormbringers, then this sacred mountain likely harbored a deeper conspiracy, possibly even entwined with the ancient history of this continent. For example, consider the giants who ruled this continent millennia ago, the dragons that soared through the skies, and even more distant, the numerous Norse gods from Asgard. Loki was, on a daily basis, just an ordinary Viking lord. Even if he tried to uncover these secrets, the vast majority of Vikings on this continent wouldn't rebel against the sacred mountain. Therefore, in his eyes, Bakenbush's invasion of Valhalla was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He had to bring about this war. No matter what, your majesty, my father-in-law died fighting a dragon, so the position of Duke of the Valley is temporarily in my hands. My father-in-law was killed by a dragon that breathed evil fire. Before he died, he held my hand tightly and said that the valley had finally waited for a promising monarch after so many years. He asked me to continue to fulfill the contract he had made with the king, then he died. So, brother, what I really want to know now is, what did he and you agree on at that time? Loki asked this question because he had to confirm whether the cunning Bernard had sold out the villagers of Coldwater Village. As long as these Slavic rebels who had almost turned into beasts did not intend to take advantage of the people of Coldwater Village and Fogduck Town, then this cooperative business of chasing tigers and devouring wolves would be successful. Chapter 196 Opening the Seal. In the evening, as the Slavic slaves, satisfied with their meals and drinks, retreated to their tents to rest, Loki gathered his elite troops outside the castle, in Gormarish's former blacksmith shop. This is basically the situation now. The situation was urgent just now. I made a last-minute decision while talking with Bakenbush. After another moment of contemplation, Loki continued, slowly, tonight, we'll change our plan and not release the Vikings from the sunken city. From the current situation, Bakenbush's men total no more than 10,000, and they're all Slavic serfs. Meanwhile, according to the Sat brothers' calculations, they've recovered a vast majority of Vikings from Slavic lands, numbering nearly 9,000. We're not at a disadvantage in terms of numbers or the quality of our troops. Winning this battle won't be difficult, but now the river valley is ours. We must consider the aftermath. In the Middle Ages, Valhalla and the Holy Mountain were the spiritual pillars of the Vikings. In this era, few people could grasp new terms like monopoly and blood drinking. The masses of the Middle Ages lived daily under the oppression of the twin mountains of lords and religion. They could easily strike down their fellow poor, but they knew no way of uniting to overthrow the mountains that weighed them down. Therefore, Loki couldn't directly tell the satyr and his companions, I intend to deliberately instigate Bakenbush to lead an army to attack our holy mountain and Valhalla. I'll have them slay all the Stormlords, and then, taking advantage of the situation, salvage a few potion formulas from Valhalla. Although his companions were loyal and willing to trust him, this was still too outrageous for an ancient people. At this point, Loki couldn't determine whether these uneducated, illiterate brothers would accept the idea of plundering their temple. Therefore, he had to adapt his approach to make them understand his intentions. This was the art of language that a mature politician must master. This art of language was called subterfuge. I think we must consider what will happen next. If we release all 9,000 men today and fight the 10,000 Slavic rebels under Bakenbush, we can achieve ultimate victory. But even if we win, it will be a Pyrrhic victory. It's uncertain whether even half of the 9,000 men will survive, but what happens after that, after repelling Bakenbush, the coming winter will be our last. You see, this year the Slavic king has only sent 100 troops from his homeland. His war capital consists entirely of Slavic serfs liberated from the Dragon's Breath Plateau. We have no idea how many Slavs remain in the Slavic homeland. If he allies with the English again next year, I don't think O'Sullivan will send troops to our aid. How can the three already devastated provinces of River Valley, Dragon's Breath Plateau, and Frost Ridge withstand their next attack? Loki's analysis was clear and measured. The satyrs instantly understood the implication and frowned. So, when I heard Bakenbush say he wanted the Holy Mountain this morning, I felt we had another chance to survive. If we attack the Holy Mountain, the four provinces across from the sky-breaking mountains will likely send reinforcements. Add to that the storm monks stationed in Valhalla and the Stormlord's private army. These defenders will severely deplete Bakenbush's already modest Slavic rebel army. We can just observe from the rear. When Valhalla is almost unable to hold out, we can open the Crimson Stone statue and complete the harvest. The seven companions exchanged bewilderment. In the eyes of most Vikings, defending the Holy Mountain and the Valhalla atop it was an unspoken duty for everyone on this continent. After all, Valhalla was the spiritual pillar of all Vikings. If Valhalla fell, where would future Vikings go to exchange potions, and how could they ascend to become the chosen ones? These would be enormous problems. This is the only solution. Helplessly, Loki could only add fuel to the fire. Bakenbush and the English have jointly invaded our three eastern provinces. Have you ever seen Valhalla send a single reinforcement to aid us? If we wipe out the ambushed troops in the sunken city today, and the Slavs invade again next year, will Valhalla send reinforcements to support us? After all the hard work we've put into defending it this year, brothers, it certainly won't. In the eyes of the gods, these little mortal experiences are fleeting. We live a long life, and to Odin, growing from infancy to old age is perhaps just a blink of an eye, or a turn in his sleep. They live in faraway Asgard, too busy to observe the daily happenings on our icy land. Our women, children, even our brothers and sisters, must be protected by our own hands. It was indeed a bit awkward to instill atheism in these brothers at the last minute, but Loki knew clearly that this opportunity to sneak into Valhalla during the chaos was likely his only chance in his lifetime. If he missed it, he would spend eternity standing at the mountain gate, gazing at the sacred mountain and its massive buildings from afar. As a Viking, he had no right to force his way into Valhalla. I think the boss is right, Sartre replied gravely. We just captured Wind's Rest and became the lords of the Dale. My brothers didn't find Gustav Bernard in Slavic lands. He's probably dead there by now. We now have complete control of the Dale province. This is a remarkable achievement. Sartre was an upright young man, and what he wanted to express was almost obvious. Loki only had a few close confidants around him, and as long as they followed Loki closely, the 4 cities of Coldwater Village, Fogduck Town, Blood Pigeon Town, and Leaping Horse Hill all needed new vassals. As long as they could hold on to the results of this war, they would be able to turn from commoners to nobles. For the poor hunters in the Middle Ages, being a noble was an overwhelming temptation. Nobility meant territory, army, and a castle that would always belong to their family. Of course, there was also a high social status. In the face of such temptations, Valhalla, the holy mountain, could be put aside for the time being. After dealing with his brother's inner demons, Loki began to write a whistle letter with rather sloppy handwriting. My lords of the storm gods of Valhalla, I am Loki Starago, the new lord of Storm's End. In recent days, I have been lurking in the coalition forces of Bakumbush, risking my life to get crucial clues for you. This Slavic king is actually going to lead an army to attack our holy mountain. The valley has no more troops after the fierce battle with the English navy. My father-in-law and his entire family died in the heroic battle against the English invaders. As a devout believer in Odin, the only thing I can do now is to send out ravens to contact you urgently. Please be sure to prepare to fight against the Slavic king. There are nearly 20,000 people in his army. After sending out the raven, Loki lay happily on the bed. This practice of others killing people and me stealing chickens made him very happy. He could even imagine the scene in a few days, when Valhalla and Bakumbush would be both defeated, and he would use the bloody stone statue to release the army to easily reap the harvest. This is the right way to win a battle. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197 Death Canyon. 2 days later. Fuck you, run. Loki grabbed his companion, who had been struck unconscious by lightning, and pushed aside the pile of corpses before him. Boss, fuck you, no, Satyr, listen to me, you've been electrocuted and can't move. If you remain in the canyon, you'll be trampled to pieces by the Slavic slaves rushing in from behind. Loki forcefully yanked a second companion, paralyzed by the shock, from the ground. They were struck by the first wave of lightning, their flesh and blood itched and paralyzed. Throwing you off the cliff is your only chance. Choose your moment and try not to land flat on your face. Remember, find a gentle slope with a path leading up. Do not attempt to enter the holy mountain. Wait until the sun rises tomorrow morning. Whether we win or lose the battle, open the portal immediately. Good luck. With that, Loki swung his arms and tossed the paralyzed companion down the waterfall into the lake at the bottom of the mountain. He knew a free fall from a 400-meter cliff into a deep pool would likely kill a living person, but in this desperate situation, it was the only reaction he could muster. He cast aside his unconscious companion, and behind him, the Slavic slaves, weapons raised, surged forward like a tide. Unable to resist the onslaught, Loki joined the crowd and charged forward. The vast Slavic rebels, stranded and unable to move in the canyon, were crushed to pulp. A drizzling snowflake fell again from the gloomy sky. This was a sign that autumn was ending and winter was approaching. Bursts of thunder struck the ground fiercely. In the narrow valley nearby, hundreds of storm acolytes had emerged from the caves on either side of the rock face, leaping from the sky. Clad in black robes, they wielded a variety of strange weapons and attacked the Slavic rebels thronging the canyon. These men were all chosen by the gods of Valhalla. They fearlessly leaped into the crowd, brandishing their weapons and slashing at anyone they encountered. In the panic, another large group of slaves was pushed directly off the cliff and into the lake at the bottom of the canyon. Seeing this, Loki had to admit that he had underestimated the defenders of Valhalla, and of course, he had also underestimated the frenzy of Bakumbush. Every Slavic rebel in the field wailed, but only Bakumbush let out a roaring laugh that echoed through the valley. Ha ha ha. It feels good, it really feels good. Hey, you in heaven, come on harder. I love this feeling. Ha ha ha. I haven't felt pain in ages. I love you guys so much. At first, Loki tried to use his hands to push aside the pile of Slavic serfs before him, but as more and more people crowded in, the storm acolyte's axe could even cut through a whole section. In desperation, he drew the blood axe from his back and hacked away, trying to cut a path. Brothers, the mountain gate is just ahead. Now all we need to do is fight our way out of this valley. Everyone, follow the king's black bear and charge forward. We must get out of this ravine, or we'll all die. Brothers, charge. In the utter chaos of the battlefield, Loki scrambled and rolled over piles of corpses. In this narrow death ravine, the Slavic rebels' numerical advantage was useless. Their individual combat capabilities were vastly inferior to those of the storm poets, who had long trained in Valhalla. Within minutes of the lightning strike, the Slavic slaves piled in the ravine had become piles of corpses, creating a mountain of corpses. This in turn created difficulties for the advancing forces. Yet, despite this, the Slavic army maintained a remarkable pace, for one reason only: Bakambush, charging at the forefront. He and the enormous black bear at his side had greatly broadened Loki's horizons. Since the battle began, Bakambush had single-handedly killed nearly half of the Slavic army. His fighting skills were extremely simple. Loki lay among the corpses, observing him for a long time, but he didn't even see him display any divine power. This man didn't even possess a weapon. All his attacks were from his own body. His combat techniques consisted of a charge followed by a punch, a charge followed by a palm strike, and a charge followed by a head or elbow strike. This fighting style was essentially the same as that of a bear man in a primitive environment. However, a single punch from him could easily rip a storm acolyte apart from the front. Similarly, a simple palm strike from him could send 3 or 4 enemies flying dozens of meters away, slamming into the stone walls on either side, reducing them to a bloody mess. Simple, primitive, and extremely direct, but admittedly, highly effective. Ha, not bad, quite tough. You better show some strength. Don't all die all at once, or you'll be vulnerable. Blood-soaked, Bakambush's eyes gleamed with excitement as he fiercely wiped the blood from his face. The next target was a storm herald hovering in midair. Thick bolts of lightning emanated from this man's hands. He wore the azure robes of a storm herald, his raised hands clutching a hammer in one and a sword in the other. Undoubtedly, he was a thundercaller of high sequence level, leading his disciples in establishing the first line of defense within this narrow canyon. Haha, ignorant white bear. I recognize you. Normally, you hide in Murmansk, and I'd leave you alone. But today, you dared to seek death in my holy Viking mountain. You can't blame me. The storm herald opened his arms, and 2 massive bolts of lightning, nearly 5 meters in diameter, slammed down from the sky. Their target wasn't the ant-like Slavic rebels in the narrow ravine, but rather 2 hidden caves nestled in the mountainside on either side. The lightning bolts precisely shattered the boulders covering the cave entrances. With a tremor in the ground, 2 giant snakes as thick as Viking longships crawled out from the mountainside. The monstrous snake opened its mouth and swallowed 7 or 8 Slavic rebels in one gulp. Then, 2 massive snakes tumbled down to the center of the canyon, easily crushing a number of Slavic rebels with their immense bulk. The 2 snakes had clearly been trapped in the cave for quite some time. Their maws opened wide, revealing several sharp fangs. Just as those teeth, dripping with transparent venom, were about to strike Bakambush's back, a high-pitched roar echoed, and the black bear accompanying Bakambush suddenly grew several meters in size. It crushed the head of one giant snake with a single blow, then opened its jaws and clamped down on another 7-inch serpent. This gave Bakambush time to confront the Stormbringer. It was only a few seconds, but it was more than enough time. Chapter 198, Tao Follows Nature. That's pretty good, muttered Bakambush to himself as he reached the storm messenger's feet. Thick bolts of lightning struck him, scorching his clothes but leaving his skin unscathed. Bathed in the lightning, Bakambush glanced helplessly at the 2 fallen snakes behind him and sighed. That's it? Never mind, let's keep going. Picking up a brick-sized piece of rubble from the ground, he threw it like a discus thrower, hurling it skyward. The flimsy rock transformed into a meteor, colliding with the storm messenger's chest with a resounding boom. Unable to remain suspended in the air, he plummeted. Bakambush's furry hands met his gaze. He grabbed the storm messenger's ankles and hurled him to the ground. The living being, made of flesh and blood, burst like a balloon shattered by a giant hand, blood, viscera, and bone splattering out. After dispatching the Storm Lord with a single blow, Bakambush clapped his hands and glanced behind him in silence. Let's go, 2 broken snakes are no good. I bet there's more inside. With a single rebuke to the black bear munching on the snake's gallbladder, the somewhat solitary figure continued toward the Holy Mountain's gate. The entire time, He didn't even glance at the Slavic serfs locked in a bloody battle with the storm monk behind him, as if they were just a bunch of passers-by with no connection to him. Hidden in the rubble of the mountain stream, Loki followed Bakumbush the entire way. This was his first time watching this man fight. And the Slavic king was the strongest human Loki had ever seen. Barely the strongest. He was even certain that even if Master King used his flying sword to fight him head-on, he wouldn't gain any advantage. His skills had reached a state of pure simplicity, a state of uncompromising refinement. He had no need for external tools like scimitars, flying swords, or axes. His only weapons were his bare hands. Like the beasts of the forest, he dispatched his enemies with the most direct and simple means. Hiding behind the boulder and watching the battle at Bakumbush, Loki couldn't help but recall the Taoist school of the Tang dynasty in the east. Taoism has two founders. Zhuangzi advocated selflessness, no merit, no name, relying on nothing and wandering freely in the boundless, a concept he considered unfettered and carefree. It was this inherent freedom, coupled with his core belief that he could not be exploited by anyone, that led him to completely renounce spiritual sorcery and roam the world with his sword. However, Laozi, the other founder of Taoism, took a different path. His core philosophy centered on the principle that man follows the earth follows the sky follows the Tao, and the Tao follows nature. Everything originates from nature. Is flying a sword natural? Not naturally. Similarly, the foundation building, golden elixir, nascent soul, and golden immortal cultivation techniques, all of which combat aging, illness, and death, are unnatural. It is precisely this unnaturalness, the forced interference with the natural flow, that causes heaven and earth to bring down thunder and catastrophes on key cultivators seeking divine and immortal enlightenment. According to Laozi, any action that goes against the laws of nature is wrong. And in Loki's eyes, the Slavic warrior's aesthetic of magic, Bakumbush, held a distinct allure of Tao follows nature. He forsook all fancy techniques and divine might. Fighting with his hands and body instincts, like an animal in nature. Perhaps it was this less is more approach, this renunciation of all external factors, that allowed him to focus on one thing, refining the most common offensive techniques, punches, palm strikes, elbows, until each movement became a natural flow. This primitive, direct fighting style was eye-opening for Loki. He kept his body close to the ground, doing everything he could to avoid attracting Bakumbush's attention. After all, his interest wasn't in killing, but simply in getting to the holy mountain. And honestly, he wasn't sure he could withstand a single blow from Bakumbush in the following period. Bakumbush once again displayed his violent nature. Unlike the cautious Loki, though equally cautious, he acted like a protagonist intent on vanquishing every monster in the dungeon. His fear was to avoid missing a single elite monster. Valhalla's publicity had always been about the 6 Stormbringers residing within the Holy Mountain. Having just defeated one, Bakumbush was determined not to let any escape. He saw the Viking raiders growing weaker and less resilient in recent years, and every Stormbringer within the Holy Mountain bore the responsibility. The annual battle with the Vikings was once one of the few remaining pleasures in the Slavic king's life. However, now, the increasingly weak pirates were even frequently bypassing his province, refusing to enter. This infuriated him greatly. He believed that Valhalla was rotten to its very core. The solution began with finding these Stormbringers and defeating them one by one. As for any subsequent corrective measures, that would have to wait until he entered the Holy Mountain. Crossing the narrow valley, Bakumbush was approaching the Holy Mountain's gates. Beneath a gatehouse constructed of polished wood, Loki spotted 2 blue-clad Stormbringers standing at the foot of the mountain gate, surrounded by no fewer than 100 storm acolytes. King Slav, I admit you're a formidable hero, but attacking Valhalla with no grudge against you, isn't that a bit too much? The Stormbringer was shrouded in a deep blue cotton robe. Only his eyes were visible, and within them a faint glint of thunder and lightning surged. Your grudges are all against the Viking lords of the provinces beneath the mountain. Valhalla within the Holy Mountain is a sacred place dedicated to the holy spirits of Asgard and does not in any way participate in the conflicts of the mortal world. What exactly do you seek in my holy mountain? Upon hearing these words, Bakumbush's eyes widened. He turned his gaze silently toward the sky, his eyes revealing confusion, resentment, and surging anger. Fuck your mother, Odin, you old man, listen to what the hell your disciples are doing now. Should a lawless thug like me be killed directly if we disagree? How come even Odin's followers have learned to negotiate with me like those old women from the south? Is there any law or order in this world? Bakambush's question echoed through the valley, and Loki shook his head helplessly. When facing a beast, one must never show weakness. Any retreat will give him an excuse to be aggressive. Today's Slavic king clearly wants to kill them all. From the foot of the mountain not far away, the deafening shouts of killing began to echo. The Slavic rebels had used their numerical advantage to break through the first barrier in the mountain stream. The gate to the Holy Mountain was in danger. Chapter 199, Attacking the Holy Mountain. Amidst a sea of blood and corpses, Loki cautiously dripped a drop of blood from his fingertip. The blood of the bloody creator activated, and as a thick blood mist began to devour the blood and corpses on the ground, he immediately pushed down the pile of corpses beside him, revealing himself and breaking into a run. As he ran, he quickly faded into nothingness, a wisp of blood smoke streaking through the Slavic rebels and storm monks slashing at each other with their swords. The high peaks flanking the Holy Mountain's gates created a nearly constant icy wind blowing through the narrow path. The thick blood mist, carried by the wind through the mountains, was immediately blown into the Holy Mountain. Hidden within the blood mist, Loki ran recklessly, finally following the chaotic crowd into the Holy Mountain. Beyond the gates lay Valhalla, the Vikings' ancestral hall where they honored their heroes. For thousands of years, every noble, duke, hero who conquered the lands for the Vikings, and renowned pirate, had their remains returned to Valhalla. Entering Valhalla after death was every Viking's lifelong wish. Legend had it that the storm priests would bury them on the sacred mountain, where their spirits would continue to bless their descendants. Rushing through the mountain gate, Loki caught his first glimpse of the majestic wooden structure. It was a vast palace, nearly 1,000 meters in circumference. It sat atop a verdant hill, its mottled stone walls eroded by time and almost fused with a mountainside. Outside, lifelike statues of Odin, Thor, Frey, and other Asgardian gods adorned the building. However, thick smoke billowing from the palace's interior marred the inherent solemn beauty of the ancient structure. The Slavic rebels, having breached the mountain gate, had already advanced into Valhalla. Shaking his head slightly, Loki felt he had grossly overestimated the Viking lord's loyalty to Valhalla. From Storm's End to entering the sacred mountain, Loki and Bakambush's army had traveled nearly 7 days, stopping and starting. While the mountain path was undoubtedly difficult, he also deliberately slowed his pace. He needed to give the 4 provinces on the other side of the sky-breaking mountains, spared by the Slavs, time to reinforce the temples. However, it now appeared that the entire Holy Mountain's resistance force consisted entirely of storm monks. The lords of the rainy plains, Wolf Creek, the Gulf, and the frozen coast were usually loyal and capable, but in this crucial moment, they didn't send even a single reinforcement to the Holy Mountain. This resulted in the 10,000 Slavic slaves led by Bakambush being too powerful. They managed to enter the Holy Mountain without suffering many casualties, and now, the time had come for a new round of slaughter. Burn, smash their tablets, burn down their ancestral halls. I hacked my master to death and tore my mistress apart. Today, I will burn all your ancestors. How wonderful. Thank you, my king, for granting me such a comfortable day. For the freedom of the Slavs, with a roar, the serf, torches held high, rushed into the blazing Valhalla, hurling his torches at the rows of tablets, completely oblivious to the blazing flames that threatened to engulf him. The Slavic serfs who had stormed Valhalla were completely frantic. The desire for destruction hidden deep within them was now fully unleashed. Loki watched the whole thing with a cold, unwavering heart. As if completely detached from the action. He had just dealt with Duke Bernard and promoted himself to Lord of the River Valley. If this modest land was to prosper, obtaining the formula for the Sequence 8 potion from Valhalla would save him at least 10 years of struggle. It was foreseeable that a large number of young Vikings would flock to the valley in the future, and he would now have the leverage to negotiate with the O'Sullivan family. Therefore, let alone burning a sacred mountain, even if it meant blowing up Asgard, where Odin currently resided, Loki would immediately begin preparations without hesitation. This was a fundamental quality a leader must possess to survive in the Middle Ages. This was the inevitable triumph of Machiavellianism. After a leader achieves unification, when the people live and work in peace and contentment, they don't care, nor do they want to care, about what he did on his quest for supremacy, Loki muttered to himself, watching the magnificent palace almost completely consumed by the flames. Valhalla was practically reduced to ash. It was conceivable that ancestors of the Starlag family must be found within Valhalla. However, Loki had already committed such heinous acts as melting their bronze statues into nails and converting their ancestral crypts into a vast bathhouse. Therefore, any sense of guilt was completely absent. The flames burned through Valhalla, revealing several peaks hidden behind the majestic structure. These were the martial arts gyms where several storm heralds trained, the farms where the storm monks lived, and the most mysterious summit of the Holy Mountain. Pushing aside the corpses and following the rush of people through the charred ruins of Valhalla, Loki gazed towards the path leading to the Holy Mountain. Just then, a new wave of storm monks, defending the Holy Mountain, rushed down from the summit. The deeper into the Holy Mountain, the more tenacious the Slavic rebels encountered. He was surrounded by frenzied, blood-maddened crowds, both in front and behind him. Loki lay prone, hiding himself beneath the corpses. He waited for nearly all of those around him to be wiped out, then he would quickly create a wave of blood mist. His target was the cave entrance at the summit of the Holy Mountain. Just now, in the thin blood mist illusion, he had sensed a blazing fire beneath the cave entrance, a sensation reminiscent of the winds once he had sensed in Leviathan's belly. The mysterious creature's psychic energy also radiated a pale golden hue. According to Loki's understanding of psychic energy, cultivating this psychic energy required at least 1,000 years ago, during the pre-Kin period, when psychic energy was plentiful. Quietly hiding himself among the corpses, Loki discreetly opened one eye from a crevice. In the medieval era, before the invention of firearms like cannons, the advantage of numbers was instantly apparent. This was especially true for the Vikings, who rarely used bows and arrows. When everyone wielded axes and machetes in a bloody melee, the superior force often prevailed. Even though the Storm Acolytes vastly outmatched the Slavic serfs in individual combat power, even the chosen ones would tire after a slaughter that lasted nearly 10 hours from morning till night. Outnumbered, the Storm Acolytes were already exhausted, while the Slavic serfs, wielding iron clubs, pitchforks, and even their bare hands, always found an opportunity to charge in and tear them apart. By then, Bakambush, who had been acting as a lone spearhead, had long since vanished. Loki looked up at the sky secretly. According to his previous instructions, the satyrs who stayed outside the Holy Mountain will open the blood-red stone statue on time tomorrow morning to release the Viking pirates stored inside. Time is running out. Last month, my editor said to me, "You melted the tablets of your ancestors at the beginning of the story. This approach is too wild. Many readers of Gideon are children. They can't accept this." Haha, melting the tablets of ancestors is called wild? I haven't burned down the Vikings' Valhalla yet. In the future, I will. No spoilers for now. P.S. One of the biggest foreshadowings in chapters 1-4 will be revealed tomorrow. This foreshadowing has been laid since the first chapter and has been laid for nearly 200 chapters. Chapter 200, The Bottom of the Cave. At midnight, as the moon crested overhead, the Slavic rebels, having fought with such fervor all day, inevitably began to tire. Looking out, the entire Holy Mountain was practically covered in a thick blanket of corpses and blood. Fine snowflakes fell again, hinting at the end of autumn and the arrival of winter. Loki led the last 500 Slavic slaves in the square to the entrance of the cave at the Holy Mountain's highest peak. The fiercest storm acolytes guarding the entrance were extremely powerful. Had it not been for Loki's personal intervention, the remaining 500 warriors would likely have perished before the gate. Fortunately, the path ahead was clear. Valhalla below had been reduced to ash, and nearly all the martial arts halls on the 7 peaks had been uprooted. The cries of battle from across the Holy Mountain had gradually faded. Only the 500 men around Loki still shone with the fire of battle in their eyes. "Hey, brothers, they say the early bird catches the worm. To be able to follow me, Loki, in the midst of chaos is a blessing that you old guys will never be able to earn in several lifetimes. I have a hunch that the place we are about to enter is the vault where the gold coins are stored in Valhalla. Just think about it." Just now the brothers rushed into the burning dilapidated house below in the fire, but did anyone find half a gold coin? The Slav brothers shook their heads. That's right. Valhalla sells so many potions every year. Where does the money go? I think it's most likely in this cave. Brothers, winter is approaching. When the entire land is frozen, our king will surely return to the Slavs. You are all heroes who won this war. The sooner the war is over, the more you must find a way to make a fortune. Don't you want to be slaves and laborers when you return home? Don't you want to take home a few hundred gold coins, buy a manor and dozens of acres of land, and live a comfortable life? The Slavic slaves looked at each other, their brains almost numb from a long day of slaughter. But hearing Loki's words, they all seemed to make perfect sense. Loki narrowed his eyes, carefully observing their facial expressions. He needed them to follow him into the cave, for he had sensed a powerful spiritual energy hidden within. Unsurprisingly, it was an ancient monster, like Fenghuzi, from 1,000 years ago. He needed these Slavic slaves to serve as cannon fodder at the front. If he sensed trouble, they would serve as his pawns. He could immediately activate the skills upgraded by the Scarlet Creator and flee. Of course, if the enemy wasn't too powerful, he would still need these cannon fodder to die first. The Scarlet Creator's lineage centered its power on blood mist. Once these cannon fodder died first, their blood would flow, allowing him to create a blood mist and absorb the powerful psychic energy from it. Having successfully incited these less intelligent Slavic farmhands into the cave, Loki cautiously followed behind them. Within the cave entrance lay only a few torches stuck in the stone wall. All the storm acolytes guarding the cave had fled and perished outside. The cave was now empty save for a spiraling staircase leading downward. The gold should be down there. Brothers, first come, first served. What are we hesitating about? But Duke Loki, you're just a Viking, how can you be more excited about plundering your own holy mountain than we Slavs? Haha, excited. Who doesn't know that the king's chief advisor, Oleg, works for me? Without my covert help, how could you possibly reach Viking lands? Loki's eyes widened as he boasted incoherently. I tell you, without me, you'd be doomed to lifelong slavery. I, Loki Starlag, am your Slavic savior. In the future, all the bards on your land will spread the name of Loki, the shackle breaker. Maybe when I return home, your respected king will immediately build a few temples for me and enshrine me there. The Slavic serfs around him looked at him, feeling that while his words might not make sense, he was truly exercising the cause of Slavic liberation. This was a fact set in stone. Without further hesitation, they raised their torches and began to descend the spiral staircase. After walking nearly 10 meters, Loki saw that the once rough stone walls within the mountain had begun to transform into delicate, artificial stone walls. These huge stones formed one prison after another, resembling cages. Within these cells, gigantic monsters were imprisoned. There were giant snakes nearly 20 meters long, harpies with eagle bodies and human heads, giant monsters that resembled humans but were much larger than humans, and winged lions with wings on their backs and 2 heads on their heads. All of these once heroic monsters were bound by thick chains and lay listlessly in the caverns. A foul odor wafted from each of the stone chambers. Raising his torch and approaching, Loki saw that most of these pitiful monsters were emaciated, their arms and chests covered in knife wounds and needle pricks. Some wounds, previously incisions that hadn't fully healed, had been reopened, festering and rotting. Beside the stone chamber lay glass bottles of varying sizes. Each contained slightly discolored blood, and some even had swarms of ants crawling around it. Fuck you, what the hell is this? Is this some sort of illegal factory producing monster raw materials? Walking past the cages, which resembled a rotting zoo, Loki covered his mouth and nose, fighting the urge to vomit with all his might. Rotting animals, rotting blood, and this dilapidated burrow infested with ants, cockroaches, and rats. As the Slavic serfs approached with their torches held high, the caged animals wouldn't even move their eyes, limp in place like zombies. They had no idea how long they had been tortured in these cages. What the hell? If the potion the Vikings drank was made from the blood of this creature, only 30% of the young Vikings would explode and die after drinking the potion. That's already considered the Vikings to be very tough. If this thing were brought back to the 21st century, I'm afraid only Indians who drink the water of the Ganges could resist the potion's toxicity. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.